Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Indra in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 81, Bonds. Naruto stood on one side of the dirt field, shaking his limbs, stretching. The last time they had fought, Naruto had only been able to use wind style, in order not to show who he really was. This time, he didn't have this limitation. On the other side of the field, Toru was still glaring at him, looking as though he was really looking forward to it. Ino and Anko were both watching from the sidelines. Hopefully it wouldn't get too out of hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I left like I did, Naruto said. Or rather, that I didn't tell you. Oh, shut up. If that was the case, you had 6 years to fix it, Toru shot back. Naruto dispelled the illusion Toru had cast while he was speaking. He shook his head. More than 3 had gone by in a blink. I have no idea what you mean by this, but you'll have all the time in the world to grovel once I kick your ass. Are you sure about this? Naruto asked again. Kicking your ass? He lifted an eyebrow. The fight itself? Of course I am. Toru snorted. You're really serious, then? Naruto nodded. Toru pulled his sword out and Naruto summoned one out of thin air. Toru said nothing, lost in the memory of the time he had seen this particular technique before. If he still had been looking for confirmation, there was no doubt anymore. This was the same Naruto, no matter if he looked nothing like the boy he had been. Are you too serious? Ino asked, now worried. Can't you just use your fists or something? Leave them be. Anko waved off. They'll be fine. That was how she settled her own conflicts, and she had turned out just fine. Toru was staring at him, which Naruto knew, even though he was avoiding direct eye contact. His gaze was hard, as if he were staring at an enemy. He knew how Toru tended to operate, and would not risk using any sort of clone technique, as he would likely turn them against him anyway. Naruto thought he was faster, but Toru had the Sharingan and his illusions. He could not afford to take this lightly. Once more, he extended his chakra senses and checked for any trace of illusion, dispelling the auditive one he hadn't noticed. Toru was channeling more chakra toward his eye, too. Their swords drawn, both of them were ready for anything. It's strange. I feel very relaxed. Excited, almost. Something about the idea of testing himself in battle against Toru appealed to him, and he could not pretend it didn't. Toru was strong. A few months ago, they had been close to the same level of strength, Naruto had estimated. No, he likely had a slight edge over the Uchiha. Both of them had been through a lot since then, he was sure. Konoha was involved in a war, and Toru had been sent to fight. Naruto, on the other hand, had spent all his free time training to kill some of the strongest men and women in the world. They both knew they were trying to figure out where they stood on the ladder. Toru likely knew Naruto was faster than him, since he knew about his lightning style. Naruto knew that Toru would try to ensnare him from the start. If he hadn't managed to do so already with an illusion he had not noticed. There was only one way to play this out. He started channeling elemental chakra from his core to his entire body. The way he had visualized it for endless hours, after having observed the wreckage. They stood there, unmoving, their eyes poised and their spirit indomitable. This time, he will use lightning. Toru knew. I can't parry his strikes, then, and he's stronger than me physically anyway. Which meant he would have to go all out from the beginning. The instant before he moved, he would predict Naruto's attack, dodge his blade, and force him into a triple-layered illusion. The order of which didn't matter, and one of them would have to be chakra-triggered, since he was able to notice when he was into a genjutsu. That was the best way to beat him now. The wind rustled. Toru could see the lightning chakra build up within Naruto's body, so much of it. It spread from his core to his entire body, in a way that was not what he remembered from the former Sarutobi. Toru saw Naruto's next move and got ready to deflect the strike once they met. The Sarutobi. No, the Uzumaki was going for the straightest attack. He intended to move close to Toru, sword aimed at his throat. A textbook attack, and one Toru had countered many times before. He would do the same today. He used chakra to enhance his reflexes, Sharingan spinning wildly. Toru was ready, the first two illusions ready to be set. One through his blade, one through his eye. He would win this. He would. Naruto moved like a demon. There was no other word for it. Before Toru could even understand that the battle was already over, and long before he could wonder who would win, between Sasuke and Naruto. Naruto was upon him, his sword close to his neck, the strike as straightforward as his Sharingan had seen, his eyes almost blue with electricity. Toru then heard his own sword clatter to the ground, freed from his hand. After that. Your speed. Toru muttered. Incredible. Naruto's eyes were strong, fixed on his own, unafraid. As though Toru's Sharingan was not staring back. Or as though he was confident in his ability to prevent the illusion from taking, even at this distance. Or maybe he just knew Toru would not try anything after this. I think this one is over. Naruto just said, the true lightning cloak fading away, and his eyes turning softer again. Toru couldn't help it. He started chuckling. Yeah. He finally said. I think I lost this one. You're still paying for lunch, though. Toru said, once he, Ino and Naruto were seated in one of UMI's restaurants, one serving seafood. Naruto raised an eyebrow. And why should I? I won, fair and square. Lunch should be on you, if anything. That's not why. Then why? For being a fucking dick, mostly. Ino choked on her laughter. Naruto glared at her. He's right, you know. She just said, shrugging. Pretending you were dead for years was a bit of a dick move. Truth be told, she was very glad to see Toru again. He had always been her favorite, honestly. Sasuke was great and all, but he was, well, too intense about everything. Also, he would not have taken Anko's word that they were innocent so easily, Sharingan proving it or not. Naruto sighed and got his wallet out, while Toru made a whipping sound. Naruto paused. Do you want to listen to the story, or do I need to beat you up again? He asked, glaring at Toru. When did I ever lose? Toru frowned and Naruto rolled his eyes. He launched into the tale of his continued survival once more, wondering if there was no way Ino could just help him show his memories or something to the same effect. I was born as Uzumaki Naruto, the son of. So these two guys with the red clouds robes were from an actual organization. Toru cut in. Yeah. Naruto nodded, somewhat annoyed at being cut off. They didn't say much at the time, did they? Nope. Never saw them after, either. Well, they're called Akatsuki, and they're after the Biju, not just me, or not just Sasuke. What do they even want to do with them? Toru frowned. Biju were forces of nature, and the most likely explanation was about accumulating power. Not entirely sure, but considering the shit they're pulling from the shadows, I'll get back to that. Nothing good. Yeah, right. Jumped into the future, you say. Toru chuckled, slapping his back. You crack me up, man. Ino shrugged and Naruto said nothing, just raising his eyebrow. Toru trailed off awkwardly. Oh, you were serious, then. My bad. Go on. Wait, Karen and Sakura are here too. Toru blinked. Sure. Ino nodded. Is this like a missing ninja convention? Wait. He frowned. I came here with Hanabi. Please tell me Niji's not around. Ah, no wait. He's Akatsuki, right? He gave that scroll to her. Yeah. I'm almost glad. Hate the guy. And a fucking cage is being Sharingan hypnotized. Toru almost shouted. At least one. That we know of. Naruto corrected, wincing at his volume. Why don't you warn the other villa dash? Toru realized mid-sentence. Yeah, okay. Missing ninja and all. Ino winced. I'll at least tell Sasuke, Itachi, and my brother. About all that stuff. He decided. Naruto blinked. That's a good idea. They will believe you though, won't they? Of course, I just have to find a way to get in touch with them, which might be a bit of a pain, but I mean, we can teleport around, can't we? Yeah. Naruto nodded. I don't think it's that easy to mail the front lines or a clan head when there's a war going on. Ino deadpanned. Sure, sure. Toru waved off. I'll find a way. And yeah, I would say that was most of it. Naruto finished, his throat parched. He greedily finished his glass of water. That's kind of a lot to take in. Toru muttered. I know. Mind if I take some time to think about it, and speak with Hanabi about all that? She would need to be kept in the loop. Of course not. Take all the time you need. Naruto shook his head. Here's how to find us, anyway. Eastern Island, around the crater lake. The house that's not a spire. A spire. Or a Kimaru. Ino butted in, as though this explained everything. Ah. Okay. Toru nodded, filing the info somewhere with the rest of the island trivia. And ask Hideki about help with building a house, whenever you feel like it. Pick a place, tell him I sent you. Naruto finished. Okay, can you hear me? Ino asked out loud, facing away from Naruto. Nope. Can you hear me now? Still no. Damn. She cursed. Maybe by focusing on the bond itself. Naruto waited. Then he waited some more. He and Ino, but mostly Ino, he was more of a guinea pig, were trying to figure out a way to use her telepathic abilities through the link. It was not the same thing as simply using one of her clan jutsu to communicate with somebody within her line of sight, since the bond would not be affected by distance. Something came through the link. Several incomplete thoughts were streaming from her to him. Lo. No, dash. Here. Here. Did you hear this? Ino asked excitedly. Yes. Naruto nodded. You're smiling. How do you know? You're not looking at me. You sent the emotion, I think. Naruto could tell her face was scrunched in concentration. How? Not sure. Try opening the bond more to let things go through. Ino asked. I'll start. He could definitely feel some of her emotions, now. Pride, eagerness, affection, passion, insecurity, worry, envy, confusion. That's what Ino was broadcasting, right now, at least the emotions he could read. And she wanted him to do the same thing. Naruto barely held back a wince. There were more than a few reasons why he probably shouldn't do that. But then again, she probably had her own reasons not to want to do it either. And she still did it. It would only be fair that he did the same. Naruto reached for the connection to her mind, or maybe it was her soul, whatever that meant, really, and opened the link wide. Ino stiffened, just looking at him through their connected minds with a wide-eyed expression. She said nothing for a long while, and Naruto was starting to get worried. You feel like this, all the time? Ino asked. Naruto could picture her in his mind, and she looked sad, worried, moved, nervous, tender, excited, horrified. A peculiar, complicated mix. It was strange, being able to tell that much. I'm not sure what you're talking about exactly, and I don't know if I really want to. He sent back. It's a bit of everything. Ino started. Naruto was pretty sure she also got too much information about the way he thought about her, and more unpleasant things like his sex drive. There was no way she was going to ask him about it, though. Like. Naruto wasn't sure how much she had seen. The entities calling to you. This thrill of battle. The moon. Wind. Lightning. The storm. And something that wanted to break the world, too. Ah. This. He thought with a wince. Yeah, it's been with me for a while now. It's louder sometimes, but I think I'll manage. I hope so. Ah. I didn't mean to send that. Or this. I imagine. I'm better at compartmentalizing, but it took me years. It's no wonder you're broadcasting everything. Ah. My bad. Don't be. In a way, it's the first time you're being so open. Way to make me feel good about it. He paused. Too open, I guess. I know. But it's a lot to take in. Ino was pretty sure she now understood what Yujito had meant, the last time they had talked. He really wasn't very comfortable with the idea of committing to a single person. There would be no idyllic romance there, likely. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. The constant calls of the world around him, that he heard at all times. How was he not absolutely insane already? There was no doubt that Ino, as a Yamanaka, was fascinated by the human mind. And Naruto was one of the most peculiar minds she had ever seen. This much was getting clearer by the day. For good, and for bad. It was sometimes hard to believe this used to be the grumpy, standoffish boy who had been a Sarutobi. And she had been wrong, when she had thought he hadn't changed that much. Growing up had made him a very different person. Many of his quirks were still the same, and he would always be Naruto to her. But the crushing weight of responsibility, pressure, compromising his personal ethics, post-traumatic stress disorder even for ninja standards would have made most people give up already. That was before even mentioning Indra's apparent mind games, before even mentioning the entities calling to him. No, it was no wonder that Naruto had changed. But, she found she could accept him as he was now, anyway. And that made him a lucky man. Because he would need her really to keep him in line, and she wanted to be by his side. Okay. She sent, instead, not feeling ready to be quite so open as to tell him this. I think I got the hang of it. Let me try to go through to Sakura. While Ino did exactly that, Naruto tried to figure out a few different things. The fact that Toru and Hanabi had been brought in by Anko had reminded him of a glaring security issue. The intent-based barriers were working, as far as they knew, but if people from outside of UMI ever learned about them, they could be trained to hide that, likely. Even from themselves. Which meant that they would need to bring people who intended to join the island to another place first, to make sure they were non-hostile, at least. This would not be that hard to manage, as they could just find another island, even just a few hundred kilometers away, to act as a temporary checking point. He'd have to ask Ino how she felt about taking a boat trip, whenever they had some free time. Probably soon, then, because they would need to get back to the mainland. Naruto had a little theory, one that he had no way to prove right now, one that concerned the bonds. The soul artifacts that had come during a time of need, were directly linked to that particular need. Which meant that desire and intent had influenced them. Sakura had been half unconscious at the time, but he was almost certain that her strongest desire at the time they had manifested the link had been escaping. At least, that was what his own had been. Her power could be a reflection of that. Sasuke had wanted a way to win against Gaara, and so had Naruto. More than escaping, they had been looking for a weapon, for strength. And they had gotten a strong weapon in return, in the form of two swords. One of them, the short one, Sasuke had gifted to Toru, years ago. And Toru had managed to keep it manifested for the entire time, it seemed. Anko and Sakura had figured out how to do the same thing, apparently. Karin was where things got a bit more muddled. There had been no true need. And Naruto was almost sure that because of it, the artifact that had come out as a result had been linked to her own unique abilities. Water and earth were her affinities, after all. And they were, according to a few books on the topic, closer to nature than the other three main elements. For the same reason, wood style was supposed to be the easiest to blend with natural energy. Which meant that Yujito, as fire and soul, and with no express need at the time they had somehow bonded, likely would have an artifact due with her nature. It came in the form of a Hakama, Ino had said. Ino who would be linked to Yin, he was almost sure. Though how to make sense of it all, Naruto didn't know. Chapter 82, Baptism by Fire. An undisclosed meeting room. Do you know what you're asking? She asked, voice hoarse. I know exactly what I'm asking, I assure you. He answered, voice even. And I think of it as a favor I'm doing you. A favor? The last man in the room growled. You call this a favor? Yes, considering the circumstances. If it were up to me, only. Death would be my recourse. They were trapped, and they knew it. You are speaking about his free will? No. I am speaking of doing what is needed. You understood it, once. Umagakur, in the morning. 5 of Naruto's clones were sitting around the house, close to Ino. Each of them was studying 1/5 of a copy of Hanabi's scroll. The young Hyuga woman was somewhat unpleasant to deal with, but Ino would cut her some slack for the time being, considering the complicated position she had been put into. If she still was like this in a few weeks, they'd see then. Ino was in the house as well, sitting Caesar style, trying to figure out how to reach Sakura or Karen. Neither of them were around, and the only thing she had seen of either was one of Sakura's portals, left around UMI. That she only noticed because she knew exactly what to look for, and because they had not been masked. Well, Ino would settle for reaching Yujito, even. She could feel their presence somewhere on the periphery of her awareness, but no matter how much she tried, she could not establish the sort of mental link needed for that. Maybe it would take getting close to them physically at first. Suzuki seemed even harder to reach, as if the link itself was atrophied. Nevertheless, Ino could be thick-headed. She was not going to give up until she figured out how to do it, or she deemed it truly impossible. Naruto was sitting on the edge of the lake. Summoning the Hakama had been easy enough, once he knew what to look for. Figuring out how something linked to fire and soul that could work, was much harder. He had tried summoning a flame first, but nothing had happened. At some point, Toru came to sit next to him, entirely silent. His Sharingan was spinning lazily in his eye, belying his apparent disinterest. With a deep inhale, Naruto reached for the link with Yujito. Fire and soul became an extension of his body and he didn't understand. Naruto fell back. He breathed out. Not this time either. I heard you killed a few Konoha shinobi. Toru started, casually. Naruto groaned. What a great way to start a conversation. Toru just shrugged, his eye fixed on him. Whatever he was thinking, he was keeping to himself. You used to be very much against killing, back then. Yeah. Naruto paused, searching for words. Not that there was anything he could say that would really change the events of that day. He went with the truth. They tortured Ino. It was bad. I kinda lost control. A pause. I mean. Not really judging, then. Toru finally said, some of the tension releasing. Despite appearances, he was a shinobi who had seen war. And he was mostly at their mercy, honestly. Things are complicated in the village. Because of Danzo? Naruto asked. Ino had explained a few things about the man, and he had seen some things back in the river. Toru scowled at the mention of his name. Also, but not only. He is a symbol of many things that are wrong with the village, but he's just a man. Somebody else would replace him, if he weren't there. He's a bastard, but at least he seems to know what he's doing. I figured as much. Every village has their own Danzo. Most of them you'll never even notice. Which might be worse. At least he has some accountability. The upper echelons are not much better. Toru shook his head. For every Kakashi, every Shisui, there are twice as many Hayashis, Tsutomus, and Mitsuomis. It didn't take a war to make me see it, but it sure as hell is not helping their constant power grabs. Not sure I know these people. Naruto shrugged. Bastards, all of them. For different reasons. Silence stretched for a while. I don't want to talk about this. Toru suddenly decided. I'm not even in Konoha anymore. As you wish. I'm not exactly the biggest fan of Konoha anyway. Naruto shrugged. Yeah, you kinda had that vibe, even back then. Toru chuckled. Most people I care about are here, anyway. Sure seems so. Bring Kakashi and Sasuke in the fold, and I assume you basically have all of them. Toru carefully avoided any mention of Sarutobi. Wisely. Naruto snorted. Kakashi hides it well, but he cares more about Konoha than almost any person I can remember. He would never leave. Even with Danzo at the helm. Sure. But you never know what the future brings. True enough. Naruto admitted. Tell me, Toru, as the local pyromaniac. That's only a rumor. Toru waved off. We Uchiha don't care that much about burning things. I saw you set fire to training ground 13 when we were 10. Naruto deadpanned. I grew out of it. I'm sure. Naruto nodded slowly. What was your question? What would you use a fire for? Me personally. Also, but in general. Toru seemed to think. You want an exhaustive list? Sure. I'll write them down. Toru thought some more. For heat first. He said. Naruto wrote it down on the ground with a single touch. That's one. Since when can you do that? Toru asked, dumbfounded. Right, you mean? Naruto asked, keeping his grin off from his face. Toru grunted. Since when can you put ink, or whatever that is, down by touching things? Recently, but it's mostly for seals, really. Naruto shrugged. Okay. Go on. Fire is useful, for hunting, cooking, as a source of light. He paused. For manufacturing, woodworking, electricity, repelling insects, purifying water. Okay, these are pretty good. Naruto nodded. Creating a romantic atmosphere or, for fun. Naruto gave him a quizzical look. I really don't know if you mean burning things for fun or fucking. Does it matter? Toru grinned. Guess not. Naruto stared at the list, and found nothing that he thought would work. When you think of soul, what do you think about? Toru blinked. Are we getting philosophical? I'd say to me, at least, it is what makes you you. Same for an object, I guess. That's interesting. Naruto said. I would have said it's a notion about our feelings, memories, and beliefs being an invisible, separate thing from our bodies. Hypothetically, since it's hard to prove or disprove it. Naruto paused. For example, I met my father's remnant, but it's something that he sealed within me. So if that's a soul, what does it mean? Did he put a part of it inside me? Was his soul split in two? Or was it a chakra imprint that he left behind that acted, remembered, and thought like him? How do you tell the difference? I have no idea, either. Toru said. I believe in it, though. The soul thing, I mean. The whole Indra possession or whatever that was enough to make him believe that there was something more than just a human body. Same. Can you think of anything that would combine both? Fire and soul. Toru sighed. Man, I'm not your sounding board. I came here to get some sundae. He still got to thinking. How about this? Toru proposed. Go ahead. Naruto nodded, eager to see what he had come up with. The fire soul? Toru made a grandiose gestures with his hand, breathing the word out. I like the name. What's the concept? A way to set your soul on fire, metaphorically speaking, letting your passion burn through you. Okay, Guy-sensei. You can say this with a straight face. Naruto asked. Hell yeah I can. Naruto sighed and tried to see if there was anything to it. There wasn't. Not this one, then. Toru admitted. The spirit heat? Like, the ability to see people's souls from afar, nothing can hide from your eyes. That's closer to chakra sensing, doesn't seem very useful. Try it. It didn't work either. Alright, I think I got it. Toru continued. Ghost flame. Picture it. A fire that never stops burning. Damn, I really thought the love burn was it. Toru complained, sounding very petulant. Which part of emotional flames didn't sound like a reach to you? Anything sounds stupid if you say it so sarcastically. Anything sounds stupid if you say it so sarcastically. Naruto repeated, in a higher-pitched voice. I don't sound anything like this. Toru said hotly. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Fire in Uchiha culture? Toru asked, making sure he understood the question. Yeah. Well. Fire represents the energetic, moving things in the world. Change, in a way, too. It represents drive and passion. I see. Naruto nodded. And soul would be closer to the nature of an item. I'd say so. So combine both. Toru got it. Something to change the nature of an item. I sure hope so. Naruto laughed. Otherwise I think I'm giving up for today. I'm sure the clones are going to give me a big headache already. Let's try, then. Turn this kunai into, I don't know, a two-pronged one. Toru held the weapon out to Naruto. He closed his eyes, pressing his hand against the handle of the kunai. Naruto inhaled slowly. Fire soul change. Change. This was a regular kunai. He wanted it to be a two-pronged kunai. The soul of metal did not want to change. Naruto linked his own soul to the kunai. His soul wanted the metal to change. The metal still didn't seem to feel like it. Part of the blade became his and part of his became part of the blade. He saw the blade, the way he wanted it to be in his mind. A purple, ethereal flame started to burn around the kunai. It didn't burn, but both he and Toru could feel it emitted a strange sort of heat. The metal became mostly liquid, shifting and stretching. Naruto guided it, his focus entirely on the process that he was part of. The bond between him and the metal and him, would not allow for anything less. After what felt like hours to Naruto, but was closer to a minute in truth, he released himself from the link. He looked upon his work. Just as he had expected, the kunai was now two-pronged. That was likely the least efficient thing he could have done, considering how sweaty he now felt. The process was very chakra-consuming. But it had worked. Toru was silent, for once. What could he work into the nature of an item? What were the limits of the ability? What could he? All right. I've decided. This is the soul flame. The flame that doesn't burn. Toru nodded in satisfaction. I kinda like it. Naruto admitted. Let's go with that. They both went back to the lakeside house, Toru carrying a scroll. Look. Naruto said, holding the kunai out to Ino. His clones were not paying any attention, too engrossed in their reading. Yes, that's a pretty fucked up kunai. She nodded. I made this. He nodded proudly. He made this. Toru nodded proudly. Great. It has two prongs. Naruto continued. And it's still perfectly balanced. Toru finished. What good do two prongs even bring on a weapon made for cutting and stabbing? Ino frowned. It looks sick. Toru nodded again. I don't think she understands. Naruto folded his arms. Maybe if I had added another one she would. Well, practice makes perfect. We're going to build a forge in the backyard. Toru added. What are you guys even talking about? Toru doesn't even live here. I'm going to become a blacksmith. Naruto nodded. You don't know anything about blacksmithing, do you? Naruto shot her a defiant glare. I can learn. He only needs the very basics, anyway. Toru interjected. It's not a forge. More like a place to isolate a material from outside interferences. I'm not sure I quite follow. I'll be doing some soulsmithing. Naruto told her. Please stop making up buzzwords, I still don't know what a ceiling A/B split test is. Ino growled. Or if it even means anything. Naruto kept a straight face. I'll have you know this is very serious work, and I can't have you downplay it. We're going to be using the soul flame for it. Toru added helpfully. Ino clenched her fists. One student of Kakashi was bad enough. Was it too late to put Naruto back in prison? So, working with metal, anyway, then? She asked, instead of kicking them both in the stomach. Nah, not only. Toru looked at Naruto for an answer. It's not a forge. Fabrics are fine too. So, tailoring should be possible, now that I think about it. Naruto mused. He hadn't particularly enjoyed sewing things. Oh. Ino asked, now interested. Are you going to be making things like that cloak you got me for my birthday? Something like it. Naruto shrugged. I'm in. Ino stood up. Where are we building your forge? Soul forge. Toru corrected. I'm going to kill them. The process of actually building it was slower, without Karen around. Pulling stones out of storage, cutting them and finally shaping them with the soul flame was way more taxing, and wasteful too, but it worked. Naruto had figured out the best way to change the properties of an item was to reduce it to its most basic shape, and then weave in the desired effect during its transformation. He was more familiar with seals, so that's what he went with, using them as the base model for any intended property. Weaving the seal in his mind, and blending it into the soul of the item during the forging. There might have been a better way, but that was the one he knew. And he knew it well. Then he made the furnace a closed loop, weaving the stone itself to repel chakra. Along with him guiding the flame, it would keep most of the strange fire and heat where Naruto needed it to be. All that, in order to make it as isolating as possible. Then once he was done, he went to take a nap. A realm between time and space. Naruto found himself sitting on a wooden chair, in a dark room. The air was cold, much too cold to be anywhere close to Umi, and he knew where he was instantly. Wake up, he thought, focusing on Umi, on his couch. He was still at the table. There was a mirror in the room and Naruto felt its pull. Despite himself, he moved to stand in front of it. He stared into it directly. As he had expected, he could see Indra. Or was it really himself? The features were almost blurred, as though he would need to squint to tell who was really in there. Then, just as though he had imagined it all, it was only himself into the mirror. He let out a long sigh of relief. It has been a while, hasn't it? Naruto whirled around, a sword flashing into his hand. Indra's own hand moved, and his sword broke like a toy. The man came closer to him, walking out of the shadows with long, flowing white robes. Thunder seemed to follow him, and the air burned. Eyes that seemed older than the world itself fixed into Naruto's. Indra. Naruto breathed. So you have finally learned to call people by their chosen name, by now. Indra laughed. What is it you want? Indra ignored him, walking slowly around the mirror. You have grown, little Uzumaki. Have you seen? The way he said it, there was only one thing that really fit the bill. I've seen you and your father. Naruto finally let out. Indra paused. The sage. So you did. The man said, evenly. Back when you were a child, and back before your father's rejection drove you insane. Be still now, little Uzumaki. I did not allow you to speak beyond yes or no. Indra's voice was restrained, but it was the same unwelcome silence as the one that came before thunder. Naruto quieted down, seeing the fire inside his eyes. Do not forget this. You are mine, heart and soul. Marked for collection. You lie. Naruto managed after a long silence. How odd. Indra mused. I thought I told you not to speak. If you could just have me do your bidding, why didn't you do so already? There is nothing you can do to dash. A wave of ancient chakra, so far beyond what Naruto had ever known, slammed into him, freezing him in place. You are never out of my reach. Indra said, his eyes shining with dark amusement. You have seen the threads of fate, haven't you? Do you really believe that simply because you are not Uchiha this time around? Indra began, coming closer to him. Simply because your eyes do not perceive the world with the clarity that my own do. Naruto could feel the man's cold breath upon his face, now. Simply because you have mudded my gift with your own inferior bloodline. Then, his eyes went to his collarbones, to his navel, and to his shoulders. To the blue and green dragon circling around his left arm. Simply because you have dabbled with forces beyond your comprehension, like a child would. His eyes were dark, and Naruto felt as though he were staring into the abyss itself. Simply because you have found a few weaklings to follow you, that you dare call friends to their face. Indra laughed, like the raging thunder. Simply because of that. You think you have strayed away from my path. The air was thick around them, as though the entire world was confined to this dark room. I won't let you control me. Naruto gritted out. Control you. Indra laughed, louder and louder. But I am you. Thunder and flame exploded from his body, burning everything around him to ash. Pain consumed Naruto, as he saw his very own body burn away, starting from his hands. The last thing to go was his very soul. Naruto woke up on the couch in the evening, covered in sweat. Ino was sleeping on the floor, somewhere close. His own clones had dispelled already, and he had 5 sets of memories mixing with his own, telling him how to get rid of the caged bird seal. He went to walk outside, but he was so tense that he summoned a sword to his hip, almost automatically. Just in case. What the hell am I doing? He wondered, right after dispelling it. Naruto walked along the mountain path, settling on the cliff overlooking the ocean, where he had come so many times already. He felt a presence. Toru. Did you know your presence is like a beacon to the Sharingan? He asked, walking next to him. Never really thought of it, I have to admit. Naruto said, not turning to face him. So you still have the nightmares, I take it? Toru asked. You knew, back then. Well, it was hard to miss you thrashing and turning in your sleeping bag once a week. Toru said evenly. I have some bad dreams, too. Toru offered. Mind if I sit here? Naruto thought about it. I don't mind. He said, with a small smile. Toru sat down. Chapter 83, Unveilings. Ino says that we're traumatized, both of us. Sasuke. Sakura, too. Toru shrugged. She keeps files on all of us, apparently. Naruto gave him a dry look. I swear. If that's the way you usually start conversations. In a way, there was something very Uchiha about his bluntness. Well, not that he really had any right to complain about somebody else being so plain-spoken. He was not any better. I'm not even sure what she means by it, we're ninja. Toru continued. Naruto stayed silent for a while. What did she say exactly? That seeing Kurane-sensei die, being so helpless, led to severe trauma, and the only way we could make sense of the world was through finding strength. He had never really taken the time to think about this particular event. Better to move it aside and push through to the other side. And it was even worse for you, she said. That since you've been thrown out into the world, a world that seemed to want you dead at 13, probably led to dash. I think I get it. She told me something similar. Same for my lack of a real maternal, or even paternal figure. Naruto interrupted, sighing. It might be true, too, but there's not much I can do about it. Parental figures, huh? Silence stretched for a while. That day, Toru began, was a warm summer day. It felt just like today. What are you talking about? Something about Toru's tone made him a bit worried. Just a story about the past. Go ahead, then. I never told you about my parents, did I? Toru asked rhetorically. You didn't. Thought so. Toru nodded. Again, it was a warm day, I spent it playing outside with Sasuke. Toru continued. When I came home. He stared at some point into the distance. There was red everywhere. Toru said, with a vacant expression. Naruto took a sharp breath. She was murdered. By my father. Toru. She wasn't dead yet when I came. She told me to come closer. So I did, shaking. He chuckled. You know what she told me, with her last words? You shouldn't have been born at all. That's horrible. Naruto whispered. I guess so. Her marriage with my father wasn't one of love, and she had loved someone else. But when Shisui's mother died, mine was married off to our father by the clan. My brother is a prodigy, there's no other word for it, and the elders decided that it would be a waste not to try and see if our father could just make another. He paused. Instead, they got me. Toru chuckled darkly. Naruto said nothing, unwilling to interrupt. Oh, the clan realized soon after that I was no Shisui, no Itaki either, so they more or less left me alone. What they didn't account for, was our father losing his mind. Toru. Yeah. One day, he simply didn't recognize my mother anymore, and well, when he noticed an intruder in his home, he did what he did best as a shinobi. He fell on old reflexes. And the worst part was he didn't even realize what he had done. When he talked to me, Later that evening, he was acting so casually, as if his wife weren't lying nearby in a puddle of her own blood. Toru smiled grimly. Naruto said nothing. Anyways, maybe I'm wrong. He may have noticed something was wrong, because he died a few months later. We never really told him what he had done, and the clan just isolated him somewhere, instead of putting a crazy man in jail. Another pause. Don't get me wrong. Toru chuckled a bit. I'm not saying this one-up you, it's not a pain competition. Naruto snorted. I didn't think you did. It's the first time I really tell somebody, outside of the clan about it, though. Toru scratched his neck. I'm not sure what came over me. Thanks, for your trust, then. Naruto smiled a bit. Silence. She was wrong, though. Naruto said. Huh. Your mother was wrong. Naruto said. None of this was your fault. Isn't it? Toru chuckled. If it weren't for me being born, she wouldn't have been there at all. She'd be alive, too. He tried to shrug. Anyway, the event unlocked my Sharingan, and from that moment on, I had no more choice anymore. My clan suddenly was very interested in me. They made sure you'd become a ninja. Naruto finished. I didn't want to be a shinobi either, Naruto. Toru said. I spent most of my life wishing I could run away from it. I'm fine with it, by now, though. I understand that. Naruto nodded. I knew you would. Toru chuckled. You never said anything about this. Oh. He raised an eyebrow. Should I have? Back then. Naruto just sighed. You know, even now, I'm sorry for putting all this on you. I don't know why I told you in the first place. Toru said. It's just. I used to think things would have been better if I'd never been born. Toru shrugged. Naruto paused. You're wrong. Am I, though? Yes. Naruto simply said. I may have thought the same way as you did, in the past. That I was unwanted. But, we've got people who love us, who care about us. And he had seen just how bad his childhood could possibly have been, in different circumstances, too. Hey, I'm not saying I think that way now. Toru corrected. Even then. Just because your mother blamed you wrongly for the events that happened, doesn't mean you have to do it too. Toru chuckled. That's such a simplistic way to see things. The truth can be this simple. It probably doesn't change the rawness of her absence, but she was wrong. And you're not to blame for anything that happened then. Naruto assured him. How can you be so sure? Toru let out, his voice barely loud enough to be heard. Because you had absolutely no choice in the matter. Not in being born. Not in your mother's death. Naruto shook his head. You were a kid back then. So what if I was? It's still dash. The idea that you were somehow responsible for everything is something you came up with as a kid. Do you really think that back then, as a traumatized kid, you had everything figured out? Naruto asked. No. Probably not. Toru mumbled. Then why do you still believe it? Toru stared at him. Then he breathed out. Yeah. You're right. After a pause, Naruto spoke again. I wouldn't want you to be gone, either. Oh, really? Toru chuckled. You're going to make me cry. He mocked lightly. No, I mean it. I missed you. Naruto said with a half smile. I'm glad you're alive, and I'm glad you're here, too. Thanks. Toru said hoarsely. After some inner debate, Naruto told him about his little situation. I am your great-great-something grandfather's reincarnation. I don't quite get the punchline, I have to admit. Toru said wryly. I'm afraid of losing my mind, because there's quite literally a man who says my soul belongs to him, and that I am him. What the hell are you rambling about, now? Did you smoke something from Kaguri's stash? He had met the guy yesterday, and was not particularly impressed. I see it Satsuki Indra in my nightmares and there's some of his chakra in my soul. Naruto tried again. More literally. Silence stretched. What? Toru blinked. Did you talk to Ino about this? Yes. She's not so familiar with reincarnation either, surprisingly. That's rough, man. Yeah, you can say that again. Toru said nothing for a while. Do you at least get some fancy eye powers? Sage eyes. Sharinan, Byakugan, or I don't know. Nope. Any particular desire to set things on fire? No. Why are you asking? No reason. Why don't you ask the woman? What's her name? The cat girl that Ino mentioned. Naruto stared at him. Yujito. Why didn't he think of it? That's an idea. He nodded. Yeah, I'll do just that, very soon. You're welcome. A comfortable silence stretched over the cliff. Does my ancestor watch you at all times, though? Toru broke it. Like when you're dash. Sure hope not. There were times Naruto wondered if his ability to feel emotions the normal way was damaged. Even after such a heavy conversation, and confessing many of his own issues, he felt ready to move on to the next thing. It was as though his mind just bounced back from whatever got thrown at it, for bad and for good. And it was jarring, very jarring. He could go from feeling terrible to normal again, way too soon. At least compared to what he saw in other people. The upside? It meant his mood was already much better now, but Naruto still didn't feel like going to sleep. The first thing he did was create a few clones to plan for some things. He'd have to do the actual work himself tomorrow, but sharpening the axe was always the most important part for this kind of project. The second thing. Are you up? He tried to send a thought to Ino, not really expecting much. Naruto was walking along the coast, alone, feeling very much awake. You don't need to broadcast so loud, it's like you're screaming into my head. Ino sent back. My bad. It's fine, really. You're new at this. Thanks. Anyways, yeah. I'm awake. Did you want something? Wanna go on a night boat trip? Right now. There's no answer for a little while. Then he felt some excitement that he knew was not coming from him. For an instant, he thought he saw Ino lying on the couch, her long hair strewn across the pillow, a smile on her face. Do you even know how to sail? Shinjiro taught me. Is it safe? The sea is calm tonight. Besides, we're ninja. We'll be fine. A pause. Okay. Meet me on the southern Mist Island, then. We'll be back by morning. Naruto felt a smile come to his face when Ino finally arrived with a cracking sound. She was wearing a purple sundress, her hair in a high ponytail. Have you waited for long? She greeted him. Not really. Naruto shook his head. Just making sure everything was in order with the boat. With a flourish, he pointed at the large boat, whose previous red sails had been sealed away, for the time being. The propellers would be enough. That's a huge boat. Ino whistled. Are you sure we'll be fine handling it? And by we, let's be honest, I mean you, mostly. Naruto laughed and summoned a clone. Yeah, true. Ino chuckled. There is that. After you. Naruto gave an exaggerated bow. Oh me, oh my. Ino laughed. A woman could get used to this. Ino stared at the vast expanse of the ocean. The scent of it drew her attention. This was the first time she really was in the thick of it, without danger looming over her head. The sun was setting over the horizon, its fiery red burning itself into her mind. However, the sea wasn't the only thing that took her breath away. Close to her, wearing an open shirt that revealed entirely too much skin, Naruto looked entirely at ease, a carefree expression upon his face. The wind blew through his long blonde hair, billowing through the linen of his shirt. Ino admired his build in ways she knew she probably shouldn't. He looked at her, and she made sure she wasn't broadcasting her thoughts again. Enjoying the sea? He asked with an easy grin. Very much. I had the feeling you would. He laughed. Naruto looked somewhere to the left of the ship. Oh. Careful there. He said easily. Before she knew what he meant, and before the entire boat shook, he pulled her close to him with one heavy arm. Waves. His frame was hard against her back, and warm too. She could feel every breath he took. There was no way she'd turn around to face him, with her face so red and two peaks in the fabric of her dress. The boat rocked under their feet, with a groan, at a slow, languid pace. Naruto didn't seem in any hurry to remove his arm, either. Instead, she felt his chakra mingling with hers slowly. Ino didn't know whether he was doing it on purpose or not. In any case, it did feel very comfortable, and soon she was reaching for his chakra too. Naruto was tall enough to block out whatever sun was still up in the air. Ino was in the shade, but she didn't feel cool. And the worst part was, she knew he could hear some of her traitorous thoughts. Just like she could feel some of his, and something pressing against her ass. Mouth dry, she hoped he couldn't feel how warm she felt. She was ready to blame it all on fire users being warmer on average or something equally false, never mind the fact that she barely qualified as one. What about you? She asked, voice thick. Do you like the ocean? He scratched the back of his head. Sure. It feels peaceful. Sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's loud, but all of it feels familiar. Ino felt him grin, and for a second she wanted to turn around, consequences be damned, just to see it. To kiss him, maybe. Want to see something? Yes. She managed to make it sound casual, too. Standing behind her, he reached for her hands, focusing. I'm not sure how to do this exactly, but... She felt it right away. As a Yamanaka, her sensing ability is based on different principles than the mind's eye of the Kagura, which was what Karen basically taught Naruto. Well, a watered-down version. When their abilities combined, showing them the underwater world with eye-piercing color, but in truth were two different ways of perceiving chakra textures and signatures blending together, a sense of wonder tugged at Ino's throat. The whole world seemed so much bigger. A laugh bubbled up within Ino. It's amazing. She said. It is, isn't? Naruto smiled. Maybe Naruto had been wrong, earlier on, thinking that he couldn't feel emotions the usual way. The way he felt right now was not that different from the way he now knew Ino did. They were sitting on the deck, sharing a bottle and laughing. Her hair was now piled messily on top of her head, her eyes were bright, her lips parted, and her thoughts were getting more and more open to him. It was almost enough to make him blush. He's gorgeous, I'm in trouble. Naruto drank straight from the bottle. He still felt thirsty, despite having drank way more than Ino had. Sake burned down Naruto's throat. He set the bottle down. Maybe he should have gone for something else, in the end. In front of him, Ino drank the last of it and grimaced as well. I should have gone for water, she said, once she noticed that he saw her reaction. He laughed easily. Maybe we both should have. She set the bottle down, not really paying attention to it. It fell and started rolling away from her. Ah, shit. She laughed, a bit drunkenly, turned around and reached out to grab it. In doing so, she gave Naruto a full view of what she was wearing under her sundress. Or rather, what she was not wearing. His brain froze for a second. He stared at her long legs, her thick ass, and the pink of her sex, uncomprehending. Naruto was still staring, open-mouthed, when she sat up again. My god. She laughed. This must have looked so goofy. Ino took a look at him. Are you okay? Yeah. Yeah. What is? She probably felt his thoughts, because 1 second later, she understood exactly what he had seen. Ah. She blushed bright red, hiding her face in her hands. This is... new. Sorry, I saw everything. He tried to look sorry. Maybe, it's a bit risky, wearing no panties out in public. She groaned. I'm not doing this usually, don't be stupid. Ino then realized what she had said, and proceeded to palm her face in her hand. You? Naruto asked dumbly. Then she pointed her finger at him accusingly. You told me you liked promiscuous women. I just thought that. Ah, that clumsy word again. He could remember something of the conversation in Shimo. You came here like this, for me? Over a dumb joke I made. You were joking. She stared at him, as if she didn't believe what she was hearing. Well, yes. Of course. Who the hell still calls people promiscuous? It's so old-fashioned. Just call me a slut, or something, if you really feel like it. Naruto tried to joke. I don't care about that. You should have told me about it earlier. Wadash. How? None of this makes any sense at all. He groaned. No sense. Ino almost growled. I did it for you because I thought this was what you'd like. Naruto deflated. This was the kind of logic that only made sense when you took in account the fact that she was Ino. Look, you don't have to do anything like this for me. She was looking away, her eyes a bit wet from frustration. It was stupid anyway. She admitted. I know how you see things. I can't be your mistress. Or your fuck friend, whatever you call it. She added, noticing he was about to say something. Naruto shook his head, trying to get some clarity. I would never ask you to be. Nor anything you don't want. Then what do you want from me? She said, finally at end of her rope. We've been playing this stupid game for a while, now. I know it's not just friendship. She could feel most of his thoughts, now. No wonder she had finally acted. Naruto thought. I want to be with you. He finally admitted, both to her and himself. In a way you're fine with. Ino looked at him, with an almost pleading look. Then be with me, and with me only. Ino. Naruto sounded pained. It used to be a silly dream I had when I was a kid, but I never changed my mind, even when I thought you were dead. When did you? Ouch. His stomach dropped. I care about you, Ino. I really do. But I can't be with you the way you want me to be. I only want you. She said, nearing tears. Why can't I be enough? It's not about you. Naruto shook his head. I don't want to commit to anyone this way. I can't depend on a single person like that. It's something I just can't do. The last time I tried looking for love was during my childhood. And as Kano Amaru, Mirumaru, Asuma. Hell, even Ren. As all of them could attest, Biwako and Hiruzen were the wrong people for that. They were consummate shinobi. They would raise strong soldiers, all of them with a troubled relationship with the two of them. Just because you could joke around with Hiruzen, or ask Biwako for advice from time to time, didn't mean much. Again, they were shinobi. It was hard to say where the mask stopped, and where the honesty began. No kind old man act would hide the steel behind Hiruzen's eyes. No polite smiles would hide the purposeful distance Biwako kept between herself and people. And well, there were so many secrets they had kept between them, and Naruto could only guess at what sort of trouble the leftover ones spelled for him. He knew Ino could hear his inner monologue, and he felt her wince. A pause. Ino hesitated. Yes. Naruto tried not to hear her thoughts. He really did. She was thinking hard about something, debating whether to do it or not. I'm in love with you. Ino said bluntly. Naruto thought he misheard her. Her thoughts said the same, though. She noticed his confusion, his surprise. I really, really love you. Ino repeated. Chapter 84, Moonlighter. Why? Naruto asked, not trusting his voice. You usually don't get to choose that. Ino said dryly. I would know. Naruto paused. Ah, fuck. His eyebrows furrowed. He had wondered, of course, and he had felt her emotions during the entire day. But what the hell was love in the first place? What did he know about it? Did he even love her? Lust was easy, and desire, he was able to handle. The one thing he was sure about was that he wanted Ino to stay. As selfish as that might be. And he cared about her, too. Was this love, though? How should he know that? He had no reference point. Weren't you supposed to know when you felt it? Once more, he wondered how people managed to be in touch with their own emotions. Did somebody give them a briefing at some point? That's love, and that's envy, and that's just desire. Most of the time, he went through life feeling pretty balanced, nothing more, nothing less, besides his ambitions. Right now, though, he could see Ino's pain, and the way he was hurting her. He started, unsure where he was going with this. You don't. She finished for him, eyes carefully blank. Naruto hesitated, and then shook his head. That's not it, either. I care about you. A lot. He shook his head. I'm not rejecting you. I can't be. I won't be with anyone like that. Not Karen, either. Just now, Ino realized that she had been willing to put herself before her, and she felt some shame. Despite what Karen said their relationship was, Ino was well aware of her feelings for Naruto. Was it selfish of her? No. Not for Karen, either. Naruto admitted. That's not something I'm willing to compromise on. I'm sorry. Why? Why what? Is it so you can continue to sleep with other women? Ino spat, challenge written all over her face. She expected him to backtrack or try to rationalize it. Yes. He admitted easily, shrugging, taking the wind out of her sails. Wadash. I don't believe in shackling myself that way. Naruto said without blinking. Sex is just that to me. Sex. Bullshit. She called angrily. You're afraid. That's not it anymore. He said, shaking his head, and he honestly believed it. You say you care about me? She began, almost furious by now. I do. Would you be fine if we were together, your way, and I slept with some random man? Ino spat. She thought she finally got him with that. He shrugged again, instead. Sure. I'm not into it myself, but more power to you. It won't change my opinion of you. That's not. I don't even want to do it in the first place. Ino shook her head. She loved who she loved, even if that guy could be an insensitive jerk. How can you even think this way? Naruto thought about it. I'd say it started out as fear of relying on one person. Now there is some fear for them, too. But by now, I just don't think this is something for me. And it's fine if what I want is not okay with you. I understand that. That was about as clear as it got. Take it or leave it. She wasn't sure why she had expected anything else. He already had Karen, and, whatever that bond was with Yujito. As well as no particular intention on stopping there. Ino was a romantic at heart, and despite herself, she had let herself hope when she had understood he felt something for her through their bond. She remembered the conversation with Yujito. You need to figure out what you want, because he might not be able to give you that. Why had she decided to ignore it? Is it just that you're unsentimental in general? Ino whispered. Or is it really about me? Ino. Naruto winced. He had answered it earlier, but feelings didn't really abide by logic. If you don't love me, Ino managed. Or even like me that way, please just tell me so. It would be easier for me. Naruto paused, taking the time to ponder something. That's not it. He shook his head. What is it, then? Damn, I'm terrible at this. Ino watched his inner conflict in silence. I want you to see me. Naruto decided. Enter my mind. Ino froze. What? What for? I think it's easier if we do it this way. What do you want me to see? There was only one answer here. Everything. I won't hide anything from you. The bond only made it easier for Ino to sift through his memories. They had known it since the beginning. If she had wanted to, she would have been able to do this at any moment. He allowed her to see through his eyes. His memories, the secrets he had buried within himself, his bare soul, he let Ino see. His forgotten desire for true parental affection. Every shame, every victory, every failure. The way he thought, the reason why he did so, his fears, his dreams, his trauma, his feelings. He held nothing back. Karen. Sakura. Ino. Being kidnapped at 13. Meeting the people that would become his home. His stay in Kumo. The river, the threads of fate and time. The strange visions they brought. Growing up in a myriad of different ways, a hero, or a pariah, or just another face in the crowd. Living, dying. The different turns of it. Ino came back to her own body with a gasp. Tears were running down her cheeks. What? Ino asked. What am I supposed to make of all this? I wish I knew, myself. Naruto let out, his voice a bit hoarse. It had felt as though he were reliving everything. And there were plenty of memories he would rather not have relived again. Naruto's heart ached. I don't. Are you supposed to destroy the world, save it? Subjugate it? Ino asked, not knowing why she suddenly felt a scary need to laugh. I don't know. Naruto said stiffly. I meant what I said the other day. Power will be needed either way. He stared off in the distance. But that's hypocritical of me. Very much so. That's how the villages started. That's how Akatsuki started, too. She continued to cry. Through the bond he felt her emotions feeding back into his own, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the same need to cry. Ino had seen the way things could unfold, the never-ending cycle of death and rebirth, and the meaninglessness of it all. In front of all of this, she felt as though she couldn't entirely blame him for feeling so distant from everything, romance included. We were together, in a few of these. She finally said, between the last of her tears. More than just a few. Naruto acknowledged. We married and lived happy lives, many times over. He knew he had only seen a few dozens, hundreds of possible turns, and even that much had felt like too many. They loved each other. And then his world ended with her death, or hers with his own death. Then life started again for him. Maybe he got lucky and never remembered. Maybe he didn't, and he could pretend to ignore the pull of fate for a while. Because no matter what, something within him tells him that he's just burying his head in the sand. And no matter what, he ends up alone. Or maybe he remembered, and he ended up warring between his desire to isolate himself from the world, and his desire for companionship. Just like he was doing in this life. And then, what did a half-century committed to a single person mean, in the face of eons of the same game? Everything was so transient. Unfortunately for Ino, this time around, Naruto knew of the brothers' never-ending fight. Ino understood that. Still, at the same time. Would it be so bad? Being with me. Even if it's just for a while. Ino tried. No, it wouldn't. Naruto shook his head. It wouldn't be bad at all. He said wistfully. At first, she didn't dare say anything else. Then. She hesitated. Then she continued, as though she had read his thoughts. I think I get your reasons. I knew you would. Naruto nodded, looking like an empty husk. You can leave, and I would understand entirely. I know. I could. But no matter what. It's going to sound selfish. Or pathetic, even. She said, shaking her head. But no matter what you decide. I feel. No. She decided. I know I'm still going to be there. Waiting. And I'm not the only one. Naruto frowned. Did she mean Karen? It will pass. He said, not meeting her eyes. You'll move on. She snorted. It's been 10 years, and counting. I sure hoped it would. Ino. Nothing has changed for me. Ino shook her head. And how do you think I'm going to feel, knowing that you're going to willingly go through all this, alone? And doing it over and over again. What about Karen? Or Sakura, that foreign rat for that matter? Ino asked, arms folded. Isn't it still better to love, rather than avoid it all because it's going to end and you're still going to be there? He was about to speak. She interrupted. Still, I can't say I fully understand what you're going through. Ino admitted. I wish I could, but I don't. Not fully. I'm willing to try, though. There were memories that were his and weren't truly his. He didn't know if he could see the entirety of it, because he was afraid of losing himself. Ino understood him better, now. There were so many things he had talked about superficially. Things that turned out to be important, in the end. And many things she had thought important at the time, truly were insignificant, from his point of view. She could recognize that. He needed to give her an answer. Naruto paused. He closed his eyes, thinking. Minutes passed. The moon was high up in the sky. Maybe you're right. He finally said. And I'm an idiot. Ino stared at him. You are. But what do you mean? Ino. Naruto said, looking at her strangely. There are a few things I could never admit. What do you mean? Emotions. I have. He started. I have always been a pretty repressed person, as far as I can remember. You can say stiff, yes. Ino muttered. You've always been there for me, since I met you. You, Karen, Sakura. Where are you going with this? You three understood me, and never tried to change me. And I could not have asked for anyone else. Are you saying? Of course, he answered with his usual bluntness, taking the wind out of her sails. I love you. I love Karen, too. And I think Sakura, as well. What? You love me? Us. Ino repeated, weakly. Yes. Naruto nodded, as though this were the easiest thing in the world to say out loud, once he had finally realized. I love all three of you. And I have loved you for years, Ino. Ino said nothing for a while. Honestly, she wanted to punch him in the nose. What he said was the truth, she knew. She had seen as much through his memories, in the end. You. She shook her head angrily. You really are the greediest person I've met. And such a fucking idiot, thinking this is fine in any way. That either of us would be fine with it. Naruto nodded. That is who I am, then. A greedy fool. Ino glared at Naruto, who just met her eyes steadily. And you think you can be with the three of us? Ino almost growled. 3 women, when you can't even show yourself fully to a single one. That was the truth. I don't think so. Naruto said, shaking his head. Ino stared at him, eyes hard. Naruto finished. I know it. He said, his eyes deep into hers. Ino glared at him, ready to leave the boat. She could leave UMI, for a start, and him, as well. Then she'd figure out what to do. Times would be rough, of course, but she would manage, she knew. And instead, she was chuckling. Angrily. Sometimes. I really hate you. You know that. But the open link could not hide much. She could see he meant it. That he was willing to lose all of them over this rather than be dishonest with all 3. I won't ask for anything you're not willing to give. Naruto said. And I won't hide. You should be afraid, not proud. Ino grunted. I fear losing all of you, it is true. Naruto admitted. But I won't lie to the women I love. Not to you, Ino. A few tears rolled down Ino's face. You're such a bastard. She gritted out. Maybe I am. He nodded. A long silence stretched out. If he were anybody else, he would probably have folded here, if not before. You better take care of all 3 of us, then. Ino grunted. All of us. Whatever it is you do, who you do besides that. That's your business. Naruto stared at her with burning eyes, something possessive in them. No bland look, no careful disinterest, no veil. It was the most honest she ever saw him. There was no need for them to talk. Not with their bond. Ino would be fine with that. You're mine, then. HMPF. You're mine. Ours. Don't get it mixed up, bastard. He grinned. Lowering his head, he moved closer to her. She pulled him to her, his mouth on hers before she even knew it. Please. One of them groaned into the kiss, the link making it hard to tell who it was. Yes. It was intoxicating, forceful and soft at the same time. Her hands are into his hair, pulling him closer, and his own are on her hips. Ino wrapped her thighs around his hips, drawing on instinct alone. One that she didn't even know she had in the first place. She might be confident outwardly, but just from his thoughts alone, he knew just how new, intimidating all of this was to her. To her, his lips were tender but firm, his skill obvious. Her own are more clumsy, but it did nothing to stop her. Their mouths tangled again, and it felt like she was pushing him back for control. She couldn't get enough, and there was a hungry emotion burning in the back of her mind. Hers, or his. She loves him, and he loves her. Maybe they had known for a while, too. The feeling, echoed through their bond, makes them feel drunker than the bottle of rice alcohol had. And the look she gave him. You're beautiful. He let out. You make me feel as though I am. Ino whispered, cheeks red, despite herself. Naruto felt almost suffocated by desire, his own and hers blending in together seamlessly. Are you sure you want this? He said, voice rough. One time, one last time. He could still manage to ask. What do you think? She shot back, a slender leg rubbing the back of his own. I want you. Even then, Naruto hesitated. There would be no going back after this. He knew this. Ino, though. Ino almost sounded desperate. I want this. I need you now. Please. Fuck me. The unexpected brashness of the thought, coming from Ino, usually so careful about anything sex-related, made him feel like his heart was going to beat out of his chest, love and lust mixing inside his brain. Naruto's mouth moved along her neck, breathing hotly. His hands settled on her firm ass. Naruto. His name slipped from her lips easily, and he knew and would have, even without the memories of Ino playing with herself that came with it, that it wasn't the first time she moaned it out like this. She arched upward, pressing herself against him. His lips slid along her throat, suckling, kissing, and teasing her. Her fingers twitched in his hair, and her toes curled in pleasure. His cock ached, trapped in the confines of his pants. Eyes glazed, she stared at him, throwing the sundress over her head. Her hands are already on his belt, undoing it clumsily. Naruto could only stare at the gorgeous woman beneath him, entranced. Without taking his eyes off her, he removed his own shirt, throwing it somewhere carelessly. He saw her hungry eyes roaming over his body in delight, unadulterated lust shining through. Naruto let her unbuckle his pants with quivering hands. Naruto snagged her mouth again in a lush kiss. Her hands came up around his neck again. He stood up with her easily, carrying her one-handedly. With the other, he decided to help her along a bit, freeing his cock from his garments, and stepping out of them. He was naked too now, holding her hot body flush against his. They tumbled down to the floor again. Ino was staring at him openly, making wanton little noises. He was dripping, and he saw her flushed, transfixed face. Please. She whispered, spreading her legs for him, with the mix of confidence and hesitation that could only belong to Ino. A natural-born temptress. You're already so wet for me, Ino. He smiled. Ah. She moaned, hiding her face behind her hands, feeling it burn. He grabbed her hands gently, removing them, making her stare into his eyes. Their shared lust is almost solid in the air. Aren't you, Ino? I am. She managed. Tell me what you want. Ino was spreading her legs wider, unconsciously. I'm dying for you, Naruto. He almost came right then. Instead of entering her, he rubbed his cock against her drenched folds. The deck filled with obscene wet sounds as well as Ino's moans. Her thighs shook. Naruto, Naruto. Oh. She was fisting his hair roughly, her hips bucking, the writhe of her pussy against his throbbing cock driving her mad. She was spasming, her head thrown back. Ino let out a long, hoarse moan as she rode her orgasm, thighs slick with her arousal. That was when Naruto entered her eager cunt. Not even fully, and Ino still could swear she saw stars when he did. Was she still screaming? Oh, yes, that was her. These lewd sounds were all her. He waited for her to stop shaking before going in deeper, slowly. She took his full length, eyes glazed over. Ino buried her face into his hair, feeling too shy to show him the scandalous faces she was making. Though, she realized later, with the bond stretched so wide open, it didn't matter in the slightest, he could see her anyway. "Is this what you wanted, Ino?" he grunted out. "Yes. Yes." She moaned. "My. You should hear the way you're sounding, right now." Naruto smiled. He started to pull back a bit, before entering her fully, languidly. She let out a soundless scream. "Yes. It's your fault. You made me," his woman said. It took Naruto every ounce of restraint he still had, which was not that much at this point, not to come. He leaned in and took her mouth again, enjoying the way she was starting to move, hesitantly at first, gaining more confidence each minute. "Mine," she thought. "Look what you did to me, Ino." Naruto growled out, slamming into her. "Ah." She just moaned, not trusting her ability to make a coherent sentence. "Do you feel it?" His raging emotions, through the bond. "Why, yes." Her eyes landed into his, pools of lust and love. "My beautiful Ino." Ino was untamed. She gave a strangled sound, her sweaty body coming closer to his, her legs wrapped around his hips. Ino took him into a bruising kiss. She mumbled something into the kiss. "What was that?" he asked, as though he hadn't heard it. "I love you," she repeated. His hips began to slap down against her ass, in and out her quivering cunt. Both of them were desperate for relief, on the edge of the precipice. His mouth found hers, fucking her into a fever. Her screams are incoherent, now, the sheer passion on her face driving him higher. "And you call me greedy?" he grunted. "Too much, it's too much." Ino moaned, still not relenting. Her hips bucked again, and he knew she was close. His chakra reached to meet hers midway. He felt her clench around him, their very different natures blending together. For a moment, so did their souls. "I love you too, Ino." Her screams echoed in his ear, and he came inside her, shuddering with the strength of their shared climax. Something of his soul stayed with her, and something of hers stayed with him. They didn't say anything for several minutes. She lay on his chest, at first panting for breath, then just enjoying the afterglow, lying on the boat's deck, staring at the moon and the stars and the entire night sky. This was. Ino finally started. "Pretty nice," Naruto said, amused. She huffed, smacking the back of her hand on his chest. "I could get used to this," she said after a pause. Naruto just smiled at her, bringing her close. "You will." Naruto felt Ino's thoughts. Why was she thinking about Orochimaru's research, though? That was beyond him entirely. "I've decided," Ino said quietly. "What did you decide?" Naruto asked her. "I won't let you go through this cycle alone." A pause. "What do you intend to do?" She shrugged. "I have no idea," Ino admitted. "But if these two guys, Indra, Ajura, whatever, managed to have their chakra hang around forever, there must be a way to do something about it, too. Or a way to do the exact same thing they did," she thought. Of course, he heard it. "Ino," he said, feeling her love for him. Why did he feel so unguarded, right now? And besides, she laughed. What would other women, and passing, dalliances matter, compared to this? "You'd do that, for me? After all the shit I..." Because that's what she was offering. Finding a way to stay with him. And she made it sound so simple, too. "Only until I get bored with eternity." Ino laughed. "Then, I'm out of here." "That must have been a hell of a good fuck," Naruto mused with a grin. "I heard that," Ino said hotly, cheeks red. Chapter 85, Liminal Space. The morning after, Ino was going through the motions. She kept replaying last night. It felt as though she was watching herself through somebody else's eyes. How many times had they? She buried her face in her hands, moaning in embarrassment. She really outdid herself, this time. There were so many reasons this could go wrong. And the wanton way she had acted. Ino groaned again. So, this was sex? What did she just willingly put herself into? She was sure it wasn't the alcohol, at least. But sharing a man? The worst part was that any time she remembered the night, she could not find it in herself to regret it. Instead, she felt the very same arousal, and her desire to go back for more. Ino snorted. As if she were going to do something like this just because she was a little bit turned on. 20 minutes pass, and she's riding the man she loves again, cursing her own weakness and her easily discarded principles altogether. All right, Naruto said, once the boat came close to a remote island. Was this supposed to be our destination? Ino asked, bemused, her hair a complete mess. There doesn't seem to be anything here. Yes. Naruto nodded. That's the point. Naruto could see his clone, the one steering the boat, glaring at him. There was no doubt as to the reason, since he had spent the entire evening and night hearing the original do whatever, while he was stuck behind the rudder for an entire night. Ino noticed him, too, and she looked away. It was Naruto's clone, sure, but, yeah. Naruto jumped onto the island. Ino followed shortly after, her legs a bit shaky. He checked the size of it, and nodded to himself. Yeah, we'll make this a temporary place for newcomers to transit to UMI. Ino just lifted an eyebrow. Where the hell is he? Hanabi raged. Toru shrugged, not caring that much about the Hyuga being angry again. He just assumed it was her default expression, by now. Not that was judging, considering how eager she was to get her seal removed. No idea, really. Are you sure this is the right place? Well, yeah, that's his house, yes. Any idea what he could be doing? With a crack of thunder, two people appeared in the lake's stone circle. Even in the distance, he could see two blonde heads. They crossed over the lake with a body flicker. Toru raised an eyebrow at Ino's disheveled state, as well as the fact she wasn't looking them in the eye. More like who he was doing, then. Toru thought. Lucky bastard. He had known there was something when they had met. Ah no, true, that was likely because Ino had figured it out way before he himself did. Something up? Naruto asked them, without pausing, once he noticed Hanabi was here too. He could guess at it easily. I was brought here. Hanabi started. To UMI. On the condition that Yeah, okay. Your seal, then. Naruto nodded. Sure. Let's get this done, then. Naruto inspected Hanabi's seal critically. From a moral standpoint, he hated this seal. And he felt a strong dislike for the people in power who had let this fester for generations. Damnable clan traditions or not, letting people enslave other people really rubbed him the wrong way. Hiruzen, as well as his late father, were more than capable of abolishing and/or removing the seal. Jiraiya could have done it, and for a man who vices aside preached about humans understanding each other, he definitely hadn't done much about it. Orochimaru could have, but well, the man was not exactly a shining beacon of anything, really. He probably had been too busy stealing clan secrets to bother. And he'd probably say something about the will to power, and that anybody unwilling to break their own shackles deserved them, all that. Because that's what he had done, rising from an orphan nobody to who he was. He could be lacking in empathy there more than usual. And, why was he even making excuses for the man? Konoha really could be shitty, Naruto mused, once more. Now, from a purely academic standpoint, this seal was pretty impressive. Tying the heart, brain, eyes with the chakra network, frying them all once the first two were disabled, that was pretty clever. Naruto assumed that the seal had originally been intended for the whole Hyuga clan, but some particularly twisted person, or group, likely, had found a way to modify the seal to respond to a specific signal, to trigger it partially. Damaging the brain, and possibly the heart, depending on the user's mood. What are you doing? Hanabi asked, covering herself with her hands, despite the fact she was already wearing a towel he had given her for that specific purpose. Had he ever been so bashful? I'm checking on the seal, hold your horses. Naruto waved off with complete disinterest, which seemed to anger her, too. She glared at him and he rolled his eyes. Were the people born in the branch house even half as dickish? Niji hadn't been that bad, before joining up a terrorist group. Well, let's start then. How is it going to work? She had read the scroll over and over again, but most of the technical stuff went over her head. There were some missing elements in the scroll you gave me, Naruto said. What? Yeah. I'm assuming the guy who wrote this. And he had some idea who that was, exactly. Didn't need to bother with some of the details. What do you mean? He wrote about the theoretical way to remove the seal, but didn't actually provide the solution. Naruto shrugged. Just to prove that he could, likely. What? She had thought the scroll was enough on its own. Wait. I'm not done. I assume the Akatsuki leader, the man with the Rinnegan, had access to a better way to remove it. I'm still not sure how, though. So you mean to tell me there's no way dash? Come on. He sighed. Let me finish, at least. The theory provided is sound. Naruto walked around her. He moved faster than she could react, applying his index and middle finger to her forehead. A seal formed there. Then a second one. And the solution provided was pretty graceful. I just had to fill in the holes. In simple terms, we simply need to trick the seal here into believing you're dead. Won't that trigger the seal, destroying my eyes? Hanabi asked, fearfully. Only if we don't isolate these parts. Naruto shrugged. He applied another seal on her neck, one to bind her chakra. She fell forward with a gasp, only barely managing to catch herself on her hands. Okay. 3 more. Naruto said. Lower your towel a bit, I'll need to apply a seal over your heart. She did so hesitantly, which made him want to roll his eyes. He applied 2 different seals there. Now, your eyes, both of them. This could be complicated, using the normal way, since this one works better when put directly on them. Luckily, we're not using a brush. Hold them open. It was not particularly pleasant for her, having someone else put their finger on her eye, and then feeling the burn of a seal engraving itself upon it. Naruto did the same for her other eye. All right. He nodded. This should work. Should. This will work. He amended himself. Let's do it. He activated the seals, and Hanabi fell down, stiffening. It was no wonder, considering he had just stopped her heart and brain. He caught her. Naruto waited for a little while, trying to feel as confident as he had been when he had to make sure she wouldn't panic. Okay, this should be enough. He activated the 2 other seals resting upon her heart and forehead. These ones would isolate the signals they sent to the caged bird seal, the central one. Then he sent a pulse of lightning to her heart, hopefully starting it again. Nothing seemed to happen. Oh, fuck. If he had managed to kill her. Naruto went down, slowly, not daring to breathe. He put his head to her heart, looking for a heartbeat. He was so nervous that he could only hear his own heartbeat. He waited, stilling himself. There. It was slow, but her heart was beating. He let out a long sigh of relief. She was alive. He waited for her to wake up, or the seal to recede. Well. The seal did so first, in the end, slowly fading away, while she was still passed out. Naruto let out another relieved sigh. While she was asleep, he removed the other seals he had put on her, and moved her to somewhere a bit more comfortable than the floor. He printed a short message for her on a sheet of paper with a single touch, and let her sleep. Naruto left the house. And that's why no self-respecting Uchiha would set foot on a boat. Toru concluded, nodding to himself. That sounded convincing, he thought. Ino said, unimpressed. Yeah. Are you sure it's not because dash? We're not afraid of water. Toru interrupted. I know the Hyuga love to spread these sorts of rumors, but they are lies. So it's not true that most Uchiha never learn how to swim, either. Ino held back a grin. Some of the older generations, maybe didn't bother. Toru huffed. I can, though. Right. Ino nodded politely. Right. She had almost managed to forget the kind of mental gymnastics he tended to do to convince himself. Well, at least he was helping her figure out a way to make sense of the Tengu helmet. Meanwhile, Naruto was busy at the forge. As nice as the last day and a half had been, he would have to get back to work soon. He still didn't know where Karen and Sakura were, and even Anko had no idea what the hell Orochimaru was doing this time. Hopefully nothing with too many consequences for them. Well, he'd think about that later. He had a bow to make. He had decided to disregard traditional wisdom and go with metal as a material. Now, metal usually was not an ideal material for a bow. Not for the reasons most people would give, though. Forged steel was plenty elastic, and would not shatter. Naruto knew that the Land of Iron had used steel crossbows in the past, and they had no particular drawbacks. The actual problem with metal was weight. It was not that they were too hard to hold up, not for shinobi. But the weight reduced the bow's velocity. Velocity that depended on the draw weight, and the weight to be accelerated. As with any projectile weapon, the lighter the projectile was, the higher the velocity would be, given the same force applied to it. That was just inertia. It meant that a lighter arrow would go faster than a heavier one, of course. But the arrow was not the only thing that needed to be accelerated. The ends of the bow needed to be accelerated as well. A bow made lighter would also be able to achieve a higher velocity with the same draw weight and arrow. For this reason, aluminium worked better than steel. But even aluminium was needlessly heavy. The advantage of being able to alter the property of the material itself meant that Naruto didn't really have that problem. Sweat running down his brow, he twisted carbon, as small as he could make it, into strong fibers, and then blended them together with steel that he had made lighter by weaving specific wind attributes into its properties. All right. That was one step. He breathed. Heitake Kakashi spun around, blade whistling as it cut through the air. He was training, harder than he had in years, pushing his body beyond its limits. Again. He was in the village, and was supposed to be still recovering, but he had no time to waste. Usually, he would train with Itachi, who was about the only person who matched him who was in the village right now. Tonight, he was training alone, because even Itachi would not agree to what he was pushing his body through. He would call it punishment, and maybe he would be right. Still. Not enough. It's not enough. How many lives had been lost in the rift? Could he have saved them, if he hadn't made such a critical mistake? They were all dead. Dead because of him. They had trusted him with their lives. He did not know whether he wanted to cry or laugh madly. No matter which one he did, he knew he wouldn't be able to stop. If I'd been faster, stronger, smarter. He drew a deep breath. Mercy was a mistake for shinobi. He knew it. Had always known it. And still, he had let the enemy come closer. If he had just struck first, maybe they would still be alive. Maybe the Suna ninja would not have found the resolve to bomb the entire city. Never again. Even if it cost him his soul, he would not hesitate next time. The only affordable casualty was him. Because what Guy, Asuma, Itachi, and the others said did not matter. It had been his fault. And of course, he was still alive. Always. Narashikao, Akimichi Kojiro, Inyazuka Kiba, Matsuda Yuriko, and Mizuno Raiko had been his friends. All of them. Dead because of him. 31 men and women. Dead because of him. That was not what Obito had died for. He would have found a way, Kakashi knew. And Kakashi should have been the one to die. As a shinobi, he was no stranger to death, and he was one of Konoha's most prolific killers, on top of it. The only way he could cope with how much blood he had on his hands had been the fact that he could at least protect his own. Not anymore. He did not trust himself with this kind of responsibility anymore. How could he, if this was the result? Kakashi thought he might go back to assassination missions, once more. He was sure Danzo would not refuse. There were some people muttering in the village already. Not many, not after the first real blemish on his career in a while. But there were some. Just like his father, was the sentiment. He thought he could understand how he had felt, now. Kakashi would not kill himself, though. He still had things he needed to do. A village to protect. Enemies to kill. And someone would need to undertake the most dangerous missions. He still was one of the village's strongest ninja. It was time he became of some use to Konoha. His former students were grown. Sasuke had Jiraiya and had no need for him anymore. Toru. Maybe Toru could use his help, Kakashi admitted, but he was strong in his own right, now. No matter how much he second-guessed himself. They were both on the front lines, too, now. Kakashi hoped that things were fine for them. War was hell, and nobody came out unscathed. Hopefully, they'd pull through. A few hours after he started, Naruto stepped away from the forge. The evening sky was awash with shades of orange. His arms were shaking a bit, and a headache was building up within his head. It turned out mixing materials into something else and shaping the product was the easiest part. On its own, without any deeper knowledge of the nature of chakra as well as some creativity, so for most shinobi, the soul flame would only be useful to make sharp tools. Very pointy tools, sure, but basic all the same. Because adding specific properties to the item, making the resulting blends very soul, for lack of a better word, believe that the way Naruto wanted it to become was the way it was supposed to be. That was the hard part. And something that couldn't be done by someone who didn't know how to do it without using the flame. Just wishing for something to change to something else without knowing what the change took, and how it worked, wouldn't do anything. In a way, it had some similarities to natural order's workings, except there was nothing quite so smooth about the process of making the resulting product stable. It felt like a battle of wills of sorts. Which Naruto felt ridiculous about, since he was facing what amounted to a rock. It was also costly, in terms of chakra, but maybe he just had been particularly wasteful today, too. Hopefully it was worth it. He took a look at the bow he was holding, of a lightweight but just as durable as any sword's steel, and able to withstand melee combat just as easily. Carbon and steel alloy, enhanced by wind again to be even lighter than it should have been. The bow itself could conduct chakra and had a draw weight that could go from regular, to much higher than any longbow usually went. The kind of draw that would only work for someone with enhanced strength, and would make the best use of it. The bow itself was a beautiful thing, since changing its shape had been the easy part. Silver with a purple sheen, and a few patterns woven into it. There was no string on it. He grasped it, dashing to the mountains in a single lightning step. He absent-mindedly noted that the lightning carried to his bow easily, just like it would have if it had been one of his own chakra-conductive swords. This was the difference between regular seal-enhanced weapons and something that was forged that way. The very same principles worked into the soul of an item. A gap that normally seemed unbridgeable. Naruto was facing the ocean. No one would come there, of this, he had no doubt. He channeled lightning and wind, feeling the weapon draw upon it smoothly, like an extension of his own body. Some of the chakra went through the ends of the bow, which shaped it into a dense string. Naruto summoned a blade, shaped it into an arrow, and knocked it. The bow itself directed the chakra to the arrow, supercharging it. Naruto focused more of it through the weapon himself, feeling it respond, the chakra string becoming harder and harder to hold the more chakra poured into the bow. The air was almost blue with electrical energy, furious winds blurred the rest of the world. Naruto let the arrow fly through the night sky. A streak of light flashed, disappearing over the horizon. There he stood, under the empty expanse of the sky, watching the dark clouds roll by, hearing the tranquil sea move and feeling the soft wind breathe. Chapter 86, Bad Omens. Konoha. With Yamanaka Ino becoming a missing ninja, the headship of the clan fell to Yamanaka Yukio, who was Inoichi's nephew. And who definitely had wanted nothing to do with the title. Somebody like his great cousin Yamanaka Fu would have been more suited, he felt. Or even Kaed, who seemed to actually enjoy politics, debating and all the aspects that made Yukio such a bad fit for the position, really. But well, she came from one of the lesser families, and as talented as Kaed was, more than him, but less than Ino blood trumped desire. Which was a shame, because Yukio himself would rather be doing anything else than being the clan's public face. Most of all, he hated the feeling of being surrounded by people he felt, which was as good as knowing, for a Yamanaka, were constantly prodding for weakness or a way to further their own agenda. And speaking of it, he was currently headed to the meeting room. The Umbu let him in after a cursory scan. There were a couple of dozen other people in the room. Every other clan head was here, besides the Senjo, of course. But Tsunade had not set foot in the village in decades, at this point, and none of the few remaining members had challenged her claim to it, likely out of respect for the legend she had been. Hell, even Heitake Kakashi was here today. The sixth Hokage, Shimura Danzo, sat in front of the clan heads, his lone eye severe, as it was most of the time. The red and white hat sat on top of his head, obscuring his face. There were only so many shinobi who lived that long, and the number of them who did so while being considered one of the most dangerous men in the world, could be counted on one hand. And two of them were in Konoha. What a scary man! Yamanaka Yukio. The Hokage nodded, his voice even. Yukio bowed deeply, taking a seat at the table, in between Hyuga Hayashi, who ignored him, and Narashikaku, who gave him a commiserating glance. We shall get to the point directly. Danzo said. We have received word from the Suna front line, as well as from Kumo. Ah. Whenever Danzo spoke like this, bad news was bound to follow. What would it be, this time? IWA has joined the war. Yukio had expected a moment of shock, people frozen in their seats. Instead, there was no real surprise there. If anything, he picked on more resignation, anger than any other emotion. No wonder. With Kumo sending their Jinchuriki to the Kiri front, the conflict had escalated. According to the Raikage, they had been misled, acting under the belief that Kiri had planned to send their own. Whether that was true or not, it had likely influenced Iwa's decision. Or maybe they had planned it since the beginning, hard to tell with the rock heads. With Suna, then, Uchiha Itachi started. He was one of the youngest clan heads, barely older than Yukio himself, at 24. Then why did the room seem to be centered upon him whenever he spoke? Was this simply because he was one of the strongest ninja the Uchiha clan had ever produced? He continued, his dark eyes soft and hard at the same time. Does that mean we can expect them to go for Taki? Long ago, the village of Taki had stolen the seven tails away from Suna. Of course, Suna had never forgiven them for that. If there was ever an opportunity for them to poach the beast back, war would be it. Yukio understood that now, once someone else brought it up. This is only conjecture. Narashikaku's voice rumbled, next to him. But it is possible. It might have been one of the terms for their alliance. The land of earth and the land of canyons share a land border. Wind doesn't have that. Yukio knew that Konoha and Suna were the only two great villages not to have two Jinchuriki anymore. But while they had Uchiha Sasuke, Suna had nothing. Whatever IWA had asked for in return, it seemed Sand had accepted to pay the price. It had been a while since the balance of power had been so precarious. And it had been broken for a long time, too, in a way. Indeed. Danzo said coldly, closing the discussion. Which is why I have already sent troops to Taki. There is no guarantee they shall reach in time, though. No other question rose. Yukio felt someone's treacherous thought. Plausible deniability. What of Kumo? Inyazuka-tsum asked, her eyes dark and angry. To Yukio, the Inyazuka were dogs. This was no insult, because the Inyazuka were proud of it. They were fierce, loyal, and pack-minded. Which meant that when they lost one of their own, they would mourn openly. Kiba had been her son, and instead of lethargy, depression. Tsum had gone the other way. Wakefulness and anger. She seemed to be itching for a fight. He was almost certain she had pushed and prodded, in the hope of being sent to the front line. He could almost hear her thoughts. What good could I do here, when I could be out there, ripping these sand people's throats? There would be no mercy found in Tsum, not today, and not in the coming war, likely. She could carry a grudge for a long, long time. The fourth Hokage's legacy. Namikaze Minato's son survived. What? There were voices raising already. Danzo cut through the noise. He was one of the fifth Hokage's murderers. The Raikage caught him after he killed one of his strongest ninja, Darui of the Dark Thunder. Over the rising incredulity, Yukio saw Heitake Kakashi turn pale. That was the first time he had seen such an honest reaction from the man. Danzo thundered. He escaped Kumo. Just like he escaped us. He finished, over the angry exclamations. For he is a man that was let into our village. Realization spread through the room. With it came a heavy silence. He is the one that is known as Indra. But his real identity is Uzumaki Naruto. And he holds the 9 tails. Yukio grimaced as everybody started shouting over each other. Kakashi blinked. He was lost in memories. Sensei. He remembered the beast's red eyes, the shivers it sent down his spine. Monstrous chakra, heat, fire gathering into a sphere of pure destruction. He remembered Minato-sensei appearing out of nowhere, dismissing it. He had seemed invincible in that moment, as he always had. The 9 tails was a beast of unfathomable power, but if there was someone who could manage to do what the legendary first had done, it would be Sensei. And then Kakashi remembered seeing the impossible. Minato-sensei lying down next to his wife, never to stand back up again. No emotions. A ninja mustn't. He remembered a funeral. Rain, falling down in cold droplets, soaking what seemed to be the whole village, coming to honor their fallen leader. He remembered standing in front of the hero's monument later that day, facing the wet stone, thinking of his father, Obito, Rin. His sensei. Training sessions with his only kin. People spitting and cursing his name. Blood on floorboards. One-sided rivalry. Hidden laughter. Sacrifice. A new eye. Blood under rocks. A silly crush. Friendship. Healed wounds. A pierced heart. Blood on his hand. Training sessions with his new kin. Hope. A will to impress. Fire. Broken hope. Blood on the earth. Kakashi knew he must be shaking. He blinked and he was back in the meeting room. Sarutobi Biwako sent him a miserable look. She had been with Kushina that night, he knew. She probably felt the exact same pain, the same burden that he felt. Danzo shot both of them an unreadable look. Minato-sensei's son was alive. And a dangerous enemy of Konoha, apparently. Yukio couldn't help but notice how pale Sarutobi Biwako looked, and wondered where the third was. There were more than a few times his presence at the meetings could have been helpful. Not as the clan head, since that was Biwako, but as the only retired Kage. He had done so when the fourth had been in power, apparently, but had all but disappeared from politics after the man had died. No, that was not what Yukio was thinking about right now. Sarutobi Hiruzen seemingly was not in the village at all, and nobody knew, or was willing to tell him where he was. Which likely meant something shady was going on. How did this happen? Abarame Shivi asked. He was a man of few words. On the 10th of October, 19 years ago. Uzumaki Naruto's body was never found. Danzo said, his eye closed. At the time, we had assumed wrongly that he had died. Uzumaki Kushina's body had been speared by the 9 tails claw. Heitake Kakashi's face was entirely blank now, his open eye staring at things that didn't seem to be there. We can only assume that this man, Uchiha Madara, took him with him. Sarutobi Biwako was just as ashen as Kakashi was. It was no wonder, Yukio thought, considering the fact she had thought the fourth and Uzumaki Kushina's son was dead for close to 20 years. Uchiha Itachi stared at Danzo with unblinking eyes. We still have no proof that he truly is who he claims to be, Hokage-sama. Danzo nodded. That much is true. But no matter who he really is, there is no doubt that he intends to harm the village. As he tried already, 20 years ago. What of the Namikaze? The Uzumaki? Hyaga Hayashi asked, his face showing nothing. He has undoubtedly been raised or turned against Konoha, as his actions have proved already. What do you propose, then? Narashikaku asked, looking conflicted. Ino had likely been pulled into this mess by that man. When had they entered contact? We can't let him roam free, that much is for certain. Konoha is still at war. Heitake Kakashi hesitated. Hokage-sama. Are we sure he really is Minato's son? Yes. Danzo nodded. Kyumo tested and confirmed it. And he is the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, too. Kakashi just swallowed. I see. He just said, sounding defeated. Danzo, for once, showed what looked like a bit of pity, for a short moment, so quick that Yukio thought he had imagined it. Shall we kill him, then? Uchiha Itachi asked, lifting one eyebrow. It seems like the most reasonable course of action. Sarutobi Biwako closed her eyes. Danzo shook his head. Unfortunately, he holds the Nine Tails. We have no knowledge of the seal Minato used, and what it would mean for the beast. And we might need the Nine Tails, still. Yukio thought he understood where the Hokage was going. There was a long silence. No. We won't kill Uzumaki Naruto. Instead, we will make him loyal to Konoha, whether he wants it, or not. Chapter 87, Cascades. Konoha. Of course, as luck would have it, the bad news didn't stop here. Hyuga Hanabi and Uchiha Toru, among a few other deserters, were now missing ninja. Desertions during war were nothing new, of course, and considering they had been in the thick of the fight, stuck between Suna and IWA, there were some that would likely say that it was to be expected, considering their relative lack of experience. The actual reasons for it came as a surprise. Criminal possession of clan secrets, with intent of disclosure. Both Uchiha Itachi and Hyuga Hayashi took the news with grave expressions. Anyone could see that they were affected, though, Yamanaka Yukio felt. For take Kakashi, his last and only, in a way student leaving, seemed to be the last in a long list of unpleasant events. He simply left as soon as the meeting was over, without saying a single word. Uchiha Itachi tried to talk to him, but he just shook his head, disappearing. UMI. Toru. Toru slowly opened his eyes, trying to remember anything. He was home. His own home, and the notion was still a bit strange. Who gave out houses away for free? Was that? Toru heard Naruto call him from downstairs. He groaned, his head throbbing. Nothing a few minutes of cycling chakra and sweating it out couldn't fix, though. Huh. Who did this long, tanned leg belong to? There was a naked woman lying next to him. He knew her, of course. Akemi, a cute civilian woman who worked in one of UMI's tea houses. Huh. She had always seemed so cold, usually. Toru thought he could remember going out to drink with Naruto and Ino, but besides that. He stood up, making his way down the stairs. I'm coming, I'm coming. He grunted in answer. Damn, he really could have enjoyed the whole thing a bit more if he had drunk a bit less. Brought you food. Naruto said, chuckling from somewhere down. I had the feeling alcohol would affect you a bit more than it does me. Ino's pretty out of it, this morning. Food. Right now, the whole idea made him want to puke, but he knew that it would likely help. Thanks, man. Toru finally got down the stairs, smiling at Naruto. Naruto winced, letting out a long moan of disgust and closing his eyes. Meet me at my house a bit later, instead. With some clothes. And you can put that lipstick away. They were sitting around the table of Naruto and Ino's home. There were a few people around. Ino, who seemed amused. Naruto, who just shuddered when he saw him again. And Hanabi, who just seemed disgusted. Toru still noticed she was less tense than she had been previously. As if a great weight had been lifted off from her shoulders. And looking at her bare forehead, he could understand why. Well, maybe it had been worth it, he smiled. Got something to smile about. Ino laughed, almost carefree for the first time in. Damn, since her father had died. Toru could see one of Naruto's hands resting on her thigh, and knew it likely had to do with him. Good on them. Toru's smile widened. You could say that. Toru nodded. The only Hyuga in the room misinterpreted, of course. Disgusting. Hanabi muttered. Such boorish behavior. Wadesh. Toru was incensed right away. I was just happy that dash. Naruto cut in. All right, all right. No fighting this early in the morning. Hanabi seemed to think twice before saying anything, likely out of respect for the fact that he had managed to remove the seal. Which Toru was still curious about. Was it that easy, if a guy who was not even 20 yet could manage? Or was he just that good already? Yeah. Toru grunted. She was such an ungrateful little bastard. Typical Hyuga. Eat up. Naruto said. And here are hangover pills I got from the mainland. He said, putting a small pouch on the table. Damn. Toru laughed, taking a long sip of coffee. God, it had been months since he had some. You're prepared for war, it seems. You could say that, I guess. My clone just dispelled. Anko told him a few things apparently. Naruto nodded, suddenly serious. We're going to kill a guy who survived a failed assassination attempt on the first Hokage. In his surprise, Toru spat his coffee on Hanabi. She lunged at him over the table. Naruto explained a few things over breakfast, hurriedly. Anko had dropped by just a few minutes ago, a few dozens of Land of Canyons natives in tow. She had gathered them the day before, apparently, but it had taken her way longer to make sure they weren't obvious threats to UMI. Once she did that, she brought all of them through a portal. The fact that she was still wearing Sakura's gauntlet gave Naruto a few questions. Not about the amount of chakra it took for Anko to keep it up. If Toru could manage to keep Sasuke's sword manifested, Anko would have no real trouble doing the same with Sakura's artifact. And it was the only way to bring outside people in without marking them directly, or having Naruto take them himself. He updated Anko on the new security measures at the same time. So no, that was not his question. Rather, where was Sakura, exactly? Likely not fighting, otherwise she would have recalled the gauntlet for her own use. Anko didn't know either, as she hadn't seen her in a few days, apparently. Disappearing without explaining anything sounded like a Sakura thing according to Ino, anyway, so he would wait before worrying too much. Not that there was that much he could do. Naruto and Ino would set up the mind-connecting channel when they saw her, but that was likely for another time. No, they had a more immediate concern. IWA was about to attack Taki directly. And if they were willing to invade their direct neighbor, that meant they were confident in their chances. They hadn't done so in a long while. It would also send a clear message to the land of Earth's other neighboring countries, like the land of forests where Kusa lay and the nation of rain. Well, it seemed as though AIM and IWA were in cahoots, so maybe only Kusa was at risk. In all honesty, Naruto didn't think Taki could be saved. And there was nothing the four of them could do against an army, anyway. That was the crux of the power problem. The only way to even survive as a village was to build a formidable army of your own, or join a more powerful one. And Taki didn't want to bend to IWA, that much was clear. So, yeah. Taki was almost sure to fall today. They all knew it, including the village itself. But well. That was a prime opportunity for anyone willing to steal a Biju. For Suna or for Akatsuki. Which meant they had to go. And the only high-profile missing ninja from Taki, one who knew its secrets, was Kakuza the Immortal. It was almost a given that he'd be around. Anko had spent the entire day trying to convince people in Taki to leave. It seemed as though most of them were too proud to go. Or maybe they trusted in the fact that Konoha or the Land of Fire, technically, which was the same thing, in a way would react to the very real threat of suddenly having to share a border with IWA. Whatever the reason was, less than 100 people had come, she had said. Naruto, on the other hand, found it terribly impressive already. But there was no time to waste. He marked Toru and he marked Hanabi, which he was sure he found somewhat ironic. Then he gave each of them a mask, complete with a hood. One mask had no openings at all, the other had one for the left eye, mirroring Tobi's. I made this yesterday. Naruto said, by way of explanation. Didn't expect we'd go in such a rush, or I'd have made something a bit more fancy. They will work though, won't slip off your face or else. Thinking of it, he really should have made more of them. Are you trying to remove my pretty face from the equation? Toru asked. Naruto snorted. More like hiding your fancy eyeballs, if we're being honest. Unless the enemy pays close attention to you, it should work. Toru, you need eye contact, so I kept yours somewhat open. Bye. He corrected himself. Toru had to stifle a chuckle. You can see through yours, since your dojutsu is actually good for something. Naruto ignored Toru's angry protests. So it's entirely closed. Thank you, Naruto-san. She nodded politely. Yeah, thanks a lot. Naruto shrugged, feeling a bit uneasy. Don't thank me yet, the day hasn't even started. So. Toru started. Yeah. Is there no big ceremony, no ritual, no, nothing? Toru asked. What do you mean? We just became UMI ninja, didn't we? Where's the rousing, patriotic speech about growing strong and protecting your home? Toru grinned. Naruto grinned too. He cleared his throat. My sincerest apologies, young ones. I was so eager to see you become real ninja. I couldn't concentrate on the preparations for the ceremony. He nodded seriously, twice. Now that you're full-fledged shinobi, things will only become more difficult. I can't believe I finally graduated. Toru chuckled. Grow strong and wise, young seashells, and never forget UMI's motto. Protecting your friends. Ino asked, face solemn. Please remind me, Umakage-sama. I'm afraid I have forgotten again. Toru kneeled. If anything ever goes wrong, blame Orochimaru. It's probably his fault anyway. Toru threw his head back and laughed. A small, but real, smile was twitching on Hanabi's lips. They put their masks on. Time to go, then. Naruto turned serious again. Focus on what I'm doing with my chakra so you can do it on your own next time, and I'll take us there, just so we don't actually lose you on the way. Before he could do so, Ino pulled him in a deep kiss, and gave him a look so obviously full of emotion that Toru had to look away. Disgusting. Have you people no shame? He grunted. I might just puke. Ah, pre-battle bravado. Close to Taki. So what's the situation like? Naruto asked Anko, once they were settled high up, close to the village of Taki. They would not be allowed to get closer now. The village had been locked entirely hours ago. And Taki's barrier was strong. Nobody would get in or out before IWA managed to breach it. Many Taki shinobi were standing near the cliff, with even more of them hiding behind the trees. Watching. The very fact that she had been allowed to enter yesterday, after thorough checks, was a sign that the higher UPS were not entirely convinced in their ability to drive IWA back this time. Better that a few people unwilling or unable to fight left, rather than having everyone die, risking a mutiny at the same time. Konoha's not anywhere near here yet. IWA troops are stationed close, already in formed ranks. She muttered, never taking her eyes off the distance. Taki sent a messenger to negotiate with IWA. And using the pair of binoculars Anko gave him, Naruto could see that the man was walking toward the swarm of IWA shinobi. Swarm was the right term in general, because in terms of sheer numbers, IWA had the most shinobi out of any village, bar Konoha. Ino. Toru said. Let us see, please. It was hard to say if it was because of the mask or his tone, but he sounded pretty quiet. IWA had sent a man to meet Taki's messenger. They would try negotiating one last time. Kuratsuki, next in line for the seat of Tsuchikage, according to herself, at least and leader of the IWA forces gathered in front of Taki, observed the meeting taking place. There were some in the village that believed that she had been favored, as Onaki's granddaughter. Her only answer to that was usually a snort and a rude gesture. Anybody who even knew the grumpy old man knew that if anything, that made him less likely to want her to succeed him. Part of it was that he was harsher on his granddaughter, just like he had been on his children before. Well, she'd prove herself to her grandfather. The war had come with some surprise to her. She had grown up used to the constant state of tension, of course, but an actual war? That was something she associated with the old stories, with legends, heroes like Isamu, the abyssal giant, or butchers like Konoha's Yellow Flash, who had torn through IWA like he had torn through her family tree. She really wasn't looking forward to the senseless slaughter that was sure to come. IWA might not have as many truly exceptional shinobi as Konoha did, but they more than made up for it with their sheer number of strong ones. War was a proving ground. IWA would prove that it was the strongest village, and they'd bring down their might upon their enemies. Peace was sure to follow. And she'd prove that she had what it took to lead a nation today. Even if she had to harden her heart. She had given a specific order to the messenger. No matter what Taki's answer was. Hanabi was relaying the information to them. Well, technically. Ino was relaying it, but it was Hanabi's eyes doing the seeing. That's a pretty nifty trick. Anko nodded in approval. Sure beats binoculars. It's mostly giving me a headache. Toru complained. You're not used to the clarity brought by the Byakugan. Hanabi muttered. No wonder you have trouble seeing things as they are. You can take that back, I have the Sherry Non. Yes. Did I stutter? She shot back. I mean. You are blind in one eye. Naruto shrugged. Fuck you guys. Toru grunted. Ino was not saying much, too focused on keeping the jutsu up. The atmosphere down there seemed tense. The UMI group quieted down too. 5 minutes passed. The messenger from Taki got closer. He greeted the one from IWA. Spears made of solid ground stabbed through the man's body, by way of answer. No. Naruto grunted. Toru closed his eye in resignation. It didn't stop the pictures from coming. The IWA messenger cut his Taki counterpart's head with an entirely uneven rock blade. It was messy, to say the least. He hoisted it up on a spike. IWA cheered behind him. The Taki soldiers screamed in fury, getting ready to defend their home. Where's Fu? Naruto asked, trying to keep his personal feelings about her, and this entire situation, out of his voice. This was supposed to be a ceasefire. Where's the Jinchuriki? He repeated. I can't see her. Hanabi admitted. She's not outside, and I can't see through the barrier from that war, it's too dense. If I were closer. No. Naruto shook his head. That's enough confirmation. She's inside the village, then. Now, as to why? Why wouldn't they send Fu to fight? A lack of trust, still. But without her, even with Taki's vaunted barrier, that was supposed to be near unbreachable from the outside, there was no way the few hundreds of shinobi gathered outside could manage. IWA outnumbered them by a factor of 5, at the very least. Naruto extended his chakra senses, as far as he could from here. Taki's barrier was preventing him from getting as clear of a picture as he should have been able to, just like Hanabi. But there were 3 chakra sources that were monstrous enough to give off a slight trace. And he knew them already. How to get in, if it was in lockdown? Smash through? Was it even possible? There was a flash of orange-green chakra, and a pillar of energy rose from the dark forest, slamming into the barrier, and leaving an opening behind. Everybody had seen it, he was sure, because it had burst a hole through the plateau and the forest itself. His dilemma was solved. That was where Taki was, then. He wasted no time with talking, relaying a clear picture of what he was going to do, of where he was going to Ino. He trusted her entirely, she'd figure the best course of action from here. Naruto gathered his chakra, wind, and lightning through his legs, preparing for a long jump. Toru began. I'll drop a mark. Meet me there. The rock exploded under Naruto's sharp push. Naruto was almost flying through the air. In the distance, he saw hundreds of waterfalls, and could almost hear the sound of rushing water. A huge lake sat under the village itself, and in the distance, a tree that dwarfed any of Konoha's, even its legendary Mito tree, said to have been raised by the first Hokage. The village must have been a beautiful place. Right now, he couldn't see too much life. People were hiding, likely. No lights, and almost no strong chakra presences, besides the 3 that he was following. He landed inside the village with a grunt, less than a kilometer away from the enemy. There, he dropped a mark. Hopefully, that would be enough to avoid revealing the way they moved around to the enemy. He dashed off once more, passing several corpses. Here, the streets seemed to be littered with blood. More corpses. He landed somewhere close to the three. And close to the tree. They turned to face him. You. The beast that was Fu or something of her, at least said. It was mostly the Biju, at this point. Naruto ignored at her. Hopefully there was still enough lucidity inside the creature to know which enemies to focus on. Like the two Akatsuki members standing in front of them. A man with pupilless green eyes, and tanned skin, hardly visible behind his face mask. And a woman with blue hair, whose body was still finishing recomposing itself, from what seemed to be paper. He had felt both of their chakra, 6 years ago. Nine Tails. The woman said, her voice so cold that he knew she wasn't all too happy about his escape, back then. I didn't catch you last time you fled, jumping out of the tower. The man's voice rumbled. It won't happen today. Naruto noticed his headband. Formerly of Taki. Kakuza the Immortal? Naruto asked. In the flesh? He chuckled. Good. Naruto nodded. Why is that? The man sounded amused. Feeling brave, brat. Well. Naruto started. I already have someone who overstayed their welcome in this life to get rid of. You'll be good practice. Lightning spread from his core to the rest of his body, crackling angrily. Chapter 88, The Great Fire. Uzumaki Naruto, then. Kakuza thought aloud. Naruto said nothing, just waiting, his chakra coiled upon itself. He folded it, pressed it down. One time. Yes. Kakuza nodded to himself. Your head will fetch a nice bounty once we're done with the Nine Tails. Naruto still waited, ready to spring. He folded his chakra once more. 2 times. Did you know that Konoha just put a higher price on Y-? There. Naruto summoned a sword to his right hand. He had felt the rest of the UMI group appear close to his current position. Next to him, Fu was pushing her transformation all the way, becoming bigger and bigger, and the toxicity of the chakra in the air continued to increase. He pushed forward as his chakra burst through him, releasing like a coiled spring. Kakuzu expected a thrusting or slashing movement, and a layer of wind covered his body, offering a small measure of protection against lightning. Too bad for him, then. Naruto hadn't planned on using any sort of sword attack. The sword dispelled, its role as a distraction complete. He summoned wind around his own left hand, grabbing Kakuzu's clothing tightly. The man growled, but his feet were already off the floor. Naruto's speed carried them far away from the great tree. With his right hand, he applied the strongest explosive tag he could manage upon Kakuzu's clothes. He tried to put a chakra binding one. Kakuzu twisted his chakra, rejecting Naruto's, and managed to wrestle his hand away from him. Then Naruto pushed off of him, kicking him to the ground. Once he was sure he was far away enough, he detonated the tag. Toru stared, his hands shaking slightly. Seeing the Biju up so close, feeling its noxious chakra wash over him, hit a bit too close to home. They had come so close to dying last time. And that had only been a fraction of the weakest Biju. The one that still made his hair raise on his arms whenever Sasuke pushed himself. Fucking up here, likely meant a painful death. But then again, the same was true for any sort of war. What difference did it make if they were facing monsters in human flesh, or monsters in monster flesh, instead? They were not here to fight Fu anyway. Hopefully the girl had enough brains left in this state to realize. The paper woman stood, extending her arms. Toru started talking himself through his fear, muttering. Ino was not looking very reassured herself. But she held on. Hanabi was not faring much better than him. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide in fright. Somehow, that was what allowed him to push through his own fear. Come on, little Hanabi. He tried to go for a confident grin, despite how shaky it felt to him. Are you afraid of the mean woman? She shouted something very rude in return. But well, she seemed ready to fight, so he considered it a win. You've improved a lot. Kakuzu grunted. I should have killed you when I had the chance. Maybe you should have, yes. Naruto said evenly. Kakuzu chuckled. I'll fix it soon. Then I'll wipe my tears with the fat bills I'll get for your head. And here I thought you guys wanted me alive. Oh, don't worry. Kakuzu shook his head. You will survive. You're a Jinchuriki, after all. And we really want the rest of the 9 tails. Oh. Naruto raised an amused eyebrow. Didn't you get your money's worth, last time? About half of it, if you really must know. Kakuzu's voice rumbled with dark promise. Half. Naruto showed none of his confusion. Were they looking for him, because they thought he had the other half? The one that his father had taken with him into the Shinigami's belly? Oh, now that was pretty funny. He wouldn't tell them, of course, that would just be dumb considering they were still going to come after what little he still held. Oh. I see, I see. Naruto nodded, as if in deep thought. Why don't you come and get it, old man? It's always the same with you Jinchuriki. Kakuzu shook his head, sighing. No wonder almost none of you grow old. All raw power and brashness. The best way to die young. And here I thought it was because of old men's power plays. There is that, too. Well, I think it's about time I chop your legs off, brat. You'll be easier to carry that way. What happened to old man's strength? Can't carry one measly Jinchuriki. Naruto made sure to be as limber as he could, jumping in place to warm up. Kakuzu snorted. It's going to take longer, and time is precious. And Ino calls me greedy. Naruto shook his head. Fire style, Zukoku. Naruto felt that the way the man used his chakra was a bit peculiar. It gathered from his core, like anyone else, and then gathered into a chakra structure on his back, before the same structure moved. He could see a mask-like creature ripping itself from Kakuzu's back, launching a small fireball. It traveled along the ground and covered a much wider area than Naruto had thought. He dashed away and in, the lightning cloak covering him. Naruto wasted no time, a blade appeared in his hand and he stabbed through Kakuzu's throat. Kakuzu grunted, blood flowing from his mouth. Your speed. Not bad. Naruto squinted. Something here wasn't right. Too bad you're still so foolish. Kakuzu grinned. Tendrils wrapped around Naruto's wrist. The wind mask blasted Naruto head on, while he was channeling lightning. He fell to the ground, cut to ribbons, a dumb expression of surprise on his face. And that's why experience beats you dash. Naruto exploded in smoke. A clone. The very real seal written upon his back detonated, and a flash of light went off. Blinding Kakuzu. Do you really think you're the only one who can use deception? That was the first thing we learned as shinobi. The real Naruto shot back from somewhere behind him. Kakuzu couldn't see anything. He heard the sound of lightning coming from 2 different directions. Then 2 swords cut through his neck, separating his head from his body. Anko was still on the cliff, hidden from sight. Both armies had seen Naruto's short flight, but none of them had done anything about it. For Iwa, it was because he was inside the forest behind the enemy line they were trying to breach. For Taki, it was because they had a bigger problem than a suicidal man. Like an army in front of their home. Taki would die today, most likely. There was not that much to be done about that. A village founded more than 100 years ago, one which had never been invaded successfully before. And how long would it take to destroy all that? 1 day, 2 days? 3? No, less, probably. With Akatsuki involved, she doubted that there was anyone with power left inside the village with their free will or their life intact. If any of them were still alive. They probably regretted keeping Fu around. No power, no promise of defending against foreign threats if that was even true at all, in the young woman's case was likely worth much, if her very presence had contributed directly to the village's destruction. Well, she had tried to get as many people out of here as possible. Even getting the leader, Mizuyo, to listen to her words had taken her the better part of a day. After a lot of back and forth, he had let some civilians leave with her, on the honor-bound condition that they come back once Taki pushed the Iwa forces away, like it had done many times before. Mizuyo had insisted he didn't fear this Akatsuki. Or Kakuzu. No one could breach Taki's defense, he had said. Not even him, he had said. Famous last words. Anko wasn't sure how, but Akatsuki had gotten in. The man was probably dead by now, or someone else's puppet. Or watching the collapse. And the Biju transformation had broken through Taki's barrier entirely. The only thing that stood between IWA and the village's heart were the shinobi outside. Naruto and Ino would manage. She could only hope that the same was true of Toru and Hanabi. Anko had another thing to do, right now. Buying them time, first of all. And she had found just the way to do that. Konan's body split into thousands of paper sheets. Hanabi was not fooled by their seemingly flimsy material. Each of them had to be razor sharp. Ino was grazed by a few of them, which confirmed what she had thought. And it seemed very painful, too. Paper was thin enough to cut skin, but not sharp enough to do so cleanly, like a blade would. Its rough edge tore instead of cutting. Toru's left hand blurred, weaving what seemed to be the obvious solution. Fire style, piercing hell strike. A thin spear of compressed flame and heat shot flew through the air, striking through Konan's chest, and setting her on fire at the same moment. For someone who just had been run through, Konan looked very calm. It was no wonder, since the paper that had been set on fire just detached itself from her easily, and the hole in her chest was just replaced by more of it. Do you really think I never saw the need to protect myself against fire? Konan asked flatly. It was worth a try. Toru's sword glinted, but nothing happened. He looked down in surprise, winced and went into melee range instead. The paper surrounded him, like a wave of angry blades, and he was forced to defend himself. He danced through it all, only his Sharingan preventing him from getting cut. Hanabi was behind Konan already, the heel of her chakra-imbued palm striking true in the woman's back. She felt some of the paper turn limp, and she let out a small smile. Hanabi went through Konan entirely. Well, almost entirely. The paper reformed around her legs, extended like a whip, and she felt herself being lifted up, before she was smashed into the earth. She grunted in pain, seeing stars, and saw Konan form a paper blade. Ino had been weaving a series of hand signs, ending in one of her clan's signature ones. Mind-body disturbance technique. Konan's body seemed to freeze, before dissolving into an impossible number of paper structures. Toru pulled Hanabi out of there. Konan took control of the paper again, splitting herself in two identical clones. Her jutsu. Ino called, before transmitting the rest of the information through thought. She has no real body, or so to speak. Or at least, not right now. So we were working with the wrong assumption. Hanabi sent back. Her chakra is flowing through all of it, I can see it. You're right. Ino nodded. That means that there is no central consciousness, then. It's like a multitude of smaller ones. Toru finished. That's why my genjutsu didn't take. And he had tried. You would need to affect all of it. Hanabi said. Even a single one remaining unaffected would be enough for her to realize she's under one. And who knows just how much paper she has stashed away. Toru nodded grimly. What an annoying jutsu. Naruto was standing over Kakuzu's corpse. He let the lightning cloak fade away, as it drained a lot of chakra, even for him. He moved closer, ready to seal the corpse away. Finely honed instincts warned him, and he only had the time to widen his violet eyes before hundreds of tendrils shot through from the head and body. He didn't have the time to turn his cloak back on before they pierced him slightly. He did manage to get away, though. Before these threads managed to do whatever Kakuzu had intended to do. Naruto was bleeding from many wounds, that he forced to close, burning through his chakra even faster. Kakuzu cackled, his head and body sewing themselves back together. First lesson, brat. What the hell is your body made of? Naruto grunted. Now that would be telling. Naruto focused his chakra senses. The regular chakra beat that he associated with the heart also beat from Kakuzu's head. And from his back. A total of 6 times. 6 of them. You hit a heart inside your fucking skull. Naruto grunted. Kakuzu chuckled. They used to call me heartless, back then. I just wanted to fix it. I got carried away. From the well of negative emotions coming from the undying man, Naruto could feel a lot of pride and anger. This could be used. He filed the information for later. Kakuzu gathered his chakra, old, ancient and refined. Fire and wind and lightning were channeled through 3 masks. Earth, grudge, fear, raging flame. In a flash, a blast of intense fire and thunder and wind combined, destroyed the entire area. The great tree started burning. That's bad. Toru said. Not the fight itself. Konan was a strong opponent, but so were they, he knew. And there were 3 of them. It would be a difficult battle, for sure, but Toru was almost certain they'd manage. The Baijuyu itself seemed to be aware enough to focus most of its power on Konan, too. Not that its ability to take over living creatures like insects really helped here. The attack Kakuzu had launched had set a raging fire to the remains of the city, as well as Taki's legendary tree. What was Naruto doing? That fool! Konan cursed, bitterly. I told him to minimize the destruction. You should have kept your dog on a tighter leash, then. Toru shrugged. There won't be anything left of Taki, soon. Ino said bitterly. Hope capturing this madwoman was worth it. Maybe bringing Kakuzu here was a mistake. She admitted. But if Taki's ruin is the cost of peace, then so be it. Konan closed her eyes. I am willing to accept that. I don't think all the people who died today are fine with it, though. Ino shot back, angry. Then it might be a blessing in disguise that they have no way to voice their opinions anymore. The fight came to a halt, suddenly. Ino felt something build up. She turned her head toward the 7 tails, which had been mostly content to pulse noxious chakra, almost aimlessly. Until now. The 7 tails or Fu, maybe was staring at the burning tree, with something unreadable in its eyes. It was not a human emotion, but the closest she could name would be dismay. One of the creature's eyes was red, the other orange. No matter who was in control right now, there were some strange feelings they felt toward the tree. Was it Fu? Did she grow up around here, hiding in the gigantic tree for solace, when the world around her became too much to bear? Was it the 7 tails itself? Did it have any particular attachment to the tree, which was said to have been grown by the sage itself, in remembrance of someone, whose identity had been lost through the passing of time? No matter what the answer was, the beast roared its loss, its pain, its rage. The pressure in the air increased, until it was barely tolerable. Ino, Toru, and Hanabi backed away. The opportunity she had been looking for came to Anko. Toxic chakra exploded through the air again, even more intense than last time. The tailed beast. Both armies looked up to the growing 7 tails. Anko's clone, face hooded, seemed to come out of nowhere, surprising both Iwa and Taki. They made the mistake of focusing on it. The real Anko leaped from her hiding place silently, quick and deadly. Unseen until it was too late. She struck, like a viper. Like what Sensei had taught her, so long ago. The snake style was based on debilitating strikes. Any distraction was to be used against the enemy. 2 of them usually did the trick. She stabbed right through the heart, her blade coated in poison. Anko saw the dumbstruck expression, the realization, and then the fear. She could almost picture broken dreams, and the certainty that this was it. The body fell, and Anko confirmed the kill before dashing away, far from the screams of rage and the hail of kunao and bombs and spears of broken earth. Kuratsuki of Iwa died so, snuffed out by Mitarashi Anko before she ever got to prove anything at all to the village she loved. Chapter 89, Crucible. Naruto winced when he saw the destruction that Kakuzu's attack had wrought. And then he noticed the 7 tails slowly breaking free. He could not use any sort of water jutsu to stop the flames. And even if he had been able to, he doubted they would have been enough to stop a fire that had resulted from 3 different elements being used together. That was not a true combination, nothing like a bloodline limit, but the potential for destruction was still sky high. Looking at Kakuzu's satisfied face, Naruto realized something. This attack was not meant for me, was it? At least not only. He knew he was fast, and could avoid most attacks. Which meant that Kakuzu, who seemed to be a pragmatic fighter by any accounts besides his glaring temper issue, knew it as well. Why would the man waste that much chakra too? Naruto blinked. He felt the negative emotions churning in Kakuzu's gut. They were not aimed at him. And Naruto knew exactly what they were. He had felt similar feelings, on a much weaker scale, before. You really hate this place, don't you? Naruto asked. Kakuzu looked at him, his strange green eyes looking somewhat surprised. What makes you think that? He asked evenly. Your feelings don't lie. Naruto chuckled. Even now, after how much time? More than 70 years. Kakuzu said nothing. You still hate this place so strongly. I don't think you'll ever understand. Kakuzu growled out. I don't care to find out how you think. Naruto shook his head. I didn't before, and I don't now, either. You just put all of us in even deeper shit. Kakuzu prepared to resume the fight. I can take a guess, though. Naruto shot him a dark grin. You failed your impossible mission to kill Konoha's first Hokage. And then you got punished for messing up. Harshly. Kakuzu scoffed. This is well known. Oh, I know. Naruto nodded. You left the village or got exiled and killed elders, stole village secrets and all that. From what you keep on saying. You came to trust money only. This, at least, wouldn't betray you. Interesting. The man grunted. Is this supposed to be the part where your monologue gets me to regret all of my life choices, converting me to the asceticism of a monk? Kakashi's first iron rule of getting under someone's skin, or into their bed: never admit what you're doing before the conclusion. Naruto laughed. No. I didn't think you were the type at all. But, he said, meeting Kakuzu's eyes. Then again, I don't think you're the type to want to live. And you've got nothing to look forward to. You're just afraid of dying. Kakuzu stayed silent for a while. Naruto continued. I know a man who wants immortality, too. I thought it was just about fear. Well. No, I think it might have been about fear, at first. But. He chuckled. He wants to learn all there is to learn, read all the books there are to find, see the entirety of this world and the next. To understand the human mind fully, seek a way to evolve further and further. And to enjoy the process. And life, too. Naruto paused. At least, that's what I think he wants. Maybe that's what I would do with immortality. Kakuzu still said nothing. Naruto chuckled. Anyways. You have a form of immortality. A disgusting one, sure, relying on taking other people's hearts. Don't think I didn't notice the different chakra signatures that come from the masks. He said with distaste. But a form of it, nonetheless. What's your point, Fox? Getting kind of long-winded here. And what do you do with this immortality? Naruto asked, starting to laugh. You hoard money for the sake of money itself. Kakuzu gave him a dangerous look. What a fucking waste. I'm sure the old Taki elders would have preferred giving out the secret of the technique you stole to Senju Hashirama himself, rather than a short-sighted imbecile like you. I've met dogs with more ambition. Naruto chuckled. All right. Hopefully he had managed to finally get under his skin, now. More silence. Did he overestimate his anger? Wrong trigger points, maybe? Kakuzu growled, and 5 masks appeared behind him. It probably had worked, then. Great. Konan took to the skies with wings made out of paper. None of Ino's jutsu could reach her from there, and she was moving too fast anyway. She extended her hands, and thousands upon thousands of white squares flew, some of them covered in tags, covering the 7 tails, starting from the head. This was the way they would have kept the entire operation a secret. Except Kakuzu had screwed up in his rage. The first thing she did was to cover its eyes, in case Toru could somehow subjugate it. Not that he seemed too confident in his ability to do so. The sheets of paper were doing something to the creature. Not restraining it, not really. But making it more sluggish, making its tail swipes less precise. Whatever it was that Konan intended to do with it, there was no way Ino would let her do so. Before she could convince herself it was a terrible idea, the sort that she would insult Naruto for coming up with, Ino jumped, grabbing onto the Seven Tails' stinger-like tail. Its 6 wingtails fluttered, buzzing angrily behind its back. "Oh, God!" she heard Toru mutter from behind her. Even then, he followed without hesitation, and after some deliberation and a few curses that would have made Shinjiro himself blush, so did Hanabi. They started to climb, holding on to the beast for dear life. The Seven Tails tried to free itself from Konan, going higher and higher up. It would need to get rid of the woman, before eating the man who had burned father's tree. The Seven Tails fled through the skies, and Konan followed. Anko looked on in morbid curiosity, as the Seven Tails flew away from Taki. She had managed to kill a general and get away with it, it seemed. Sensei would be proud. I think we can forget diplomatic relationships with Taki. Whatever's going to be left of it, by tomorrow. She muttered to herself. There was only a slight problem. She saw a woman that could only be Konan following the beast. And Ino, Toru, and Hanabi climbing its back. She groaned, before summoning a flight-capable snake. Nanashi. Are you sure about this, Anko-chan? Nanashi asked dubiously, staring at the monstrous creature in the sky. Not really, no. She said dryly. But let's go anyway. As you wish. The snake nodded, waiting for her to jump on its back. They soared toward the skies as well. Kakuzu, still more angry than he had been in a while, chuckled when he saw the Seven Tails as close to full release as it got. Naruto winced. I see you've got a good handle on the situation, Uzumaki Naruto. The immortal man chuckled. Naruto grunted. Things tend to get fucked sideways pretty often for us. He couldn't drag this fight for too long. Not with a Biju on the run. Like the way this fight is going for you, then. Kakuzu goaded him. Naruto ignored him. The man was obviously a bit sour about not managing to kill someone who wasn't even 20 yet. And his wide area ninjutsu were making it very hard for Naruto to even make use of his speed. The upside was that Kakuzu didn't manage to reach him either. Kakuzu had split himself into some twisted abomination. A deformed, quadrupedal creature made out of threads, somewhere between a horse and a human, one whose skin had mostly peeled off and was hanging down from its back. Naruto could see the 5 masks shift along the surface of the threads, disappearing and reappearing at random intervals. Kakuzu was only bringing them out to attack him, by now. He didn't dare risk them otherwise. Naruto dashed away, chased by a firestorm intent on burning him to a crisp. It was only a diversion, though. Threads broke free from the earth, aiming at binding him in place. Naruto's sword flashed with lightning, cutting them before they came close. He leaped with a backflip, avoiding the bolt of thunder that struck the spot where Kakuzu had tried to keep him grounded. Naruto felt the chakra build up in the air. Wind and water, he could tell. They prickled at his skin, raising the hairs on his arms. Wave of mutilation. Kakuzu released a surge of cutting waters around him, pushing horizontally. Naruto jumped over it, summoning a single sword to his hand. Kakuzu grinned. Or at least, Naruto thought that's what it was hard to tell on his monstrous, equine face. The wind lifted the water up in deadly spires, all of them aimed at the airborne Naruto. He cursed, throwing his lightning-enhanced sword as hard as he could and summoning a new one in the same beat. Kakuzu split his threads around the sword, letting it pass harmlessly, and the blade buried itself into the broken earth, slamming into it with enough strength to remain stuck there. The water spires were almost upon him. Perfect. Naruto let out a scream. Which Kakuzu probably thought was one of fear. Which it was not. Instead, Naruto summoned his lightning cloak at full power around himself. Revolving thunder, grounding. Instead of pulling the buried sword to himself, Naruto pulled himself to the sword. His electrified mass went straight through an unsuspecting Kakuzu, who could only scream in rage, as Naruto tore through his tendrils as well as his earth mask. Naruto didn't stop there, and the moment he touched the earth again was also the moment he whirled around, 2 swords in hand. He blurred away, dodging a blast of pure wind that Kakuzu sent at him. Roaring gale. He was under Kakuzu, now. Naruto went up spinning, cutting winds and lightning following him. He went back down, slamming both swords against another of Kakuzu's masks, in a crash of air and thunder. Before Kakuzu even managed to react, he got the lightning one, this time. Kakuzu raged, tendrils swirling around him like a miniature hurricane, and Naruto backed away. Each of these hearts took me a while to get, Kakuzu said, voice rattling. Very sorry to hear that. Kakuzu felt his rage boil, and he chuckled. Still trying to provoke me, I see. So you did figure it out. No matter. My limit is 6 hearts, and 2 are missing. The earth one was a backup anyway. The other, the lightning one. This one I shall replace with yours. I haven't seen such a strong lightning style since. Kakuzu seemed to pause. Huh. I aim to impress. Naruto said dryly. You jest. But I am impressed. Kakuzu admitted. I already was when you escaped our clutches years ago. If it weren't for the beast you hold, you'd be a decent fit for Akatsuki, I'm sure. It hadn't been him escaping, but... Am I supposed to feel glad for that? Naruto asked incredulously. Forget that. Kakuzu chuckled, his voice rumbling. You're way too annoying anyway. I'd kill you too quickly. His massive body split into something more human-like again. He had realized that this huge, lumbering form was probably the worst thing he could do, against somebody so fast. Though I have to give you some CR dash. Naruto attacked while he was talking, with a sweeping horizontal slash that cut through Kakuzu's midsection, instead of the heart that he had been aiming for, which had moved out of the way. Kakuzu chuckled. Attacking while I'm dash. Naruto continued his onslaught, moving at full speed. He was so much faster than Kakuzu that the only thing that allowed the man to stay in the fight was his near immortality, and his ability to move his hearts out of the way. In a seamless transition, a clone of Naruto appeared behind Kakuzu, aiming for his brain with a wind slash. Kakuzu grunted and his skin hardened. The wind-enhanced blade crashed against him, not managing to hurt him. The real Naruto used that opportunity to stab through his eye with a lightning strike. Kakuzu roared, 3 elements mixing into a wall of death. Naruto had already retreated, though. He had sensed the chakra build-up before, which made all of Kakuzu's terrifying ninjutsu somewhat predictable. Despite the mortal danger he was in, or rather because of it, his soul felt as though it were on fire. He felt ecstatic. The lightning chakra coursing through him, making his nerves work faster, was just part of it. This was what he was born f. What the hell was he thinking? What was wrong with him? Wind style, again. Kakuzu released a compressed sphere of wind, forcing Naruto to dodge. He could sense the amount of chakra poured into it, and just as he had thought, it hit a massive range when it exploded, sending debris everywhere. Naruto dashed him again, weaving under tendrils, and avoiding a water jet that would have cut his leg off at thigh level. Kakuzu disappeared into the ground. Naruto jumped far away from him. He followed his chakra, constantly thwarting Kakuzu's attempts at getting under him. The man reappeared around a minute later. His frustration was starting to become obvious. No jutsu could reach Naruto from afar, and in melee range, he was taking way more damage than he was giving. I'm starting to tire of this. Kakuzu growled. Give up, then. Naruto shot back, unwilling to show that he was starting to be winded. Give up. Kakuzu snorted. You're about 70 years too young to be throwing such words around. Naruto rolled his eyes. Oh please, age has nothing to do with it. If you just realized there's nothing you can do to me. Great. Let's call it a day. Not that Naruto was willing to let him go. Nothing I can do. Kakuzu chuckled darkly. Yeah. Naruto nodded, injecting as much apathy in his voice as he could. This is boring. And compared to, let's say, Sasori, you're really not that good. No finesse, no skill. Just this. So predictable. And the guy's what? Less than half your age. Kakuzu said nothing, but Naruto could feel his anger simmering. I even know what you're about to say next. Naruto muttered. Brat, if only you knew what I could do to you if I were allowed to kill you. Brat, if you dash, Kakuzu cut himself off. What a shame you're not allowed to, huh. The great bounty hunter, Kakuzu the Immortal, is not even the master of his own fate. Not even with all the money in the world. What's the point? Naruto shook his head. And that's supposed to be Taki's best? No wonder the first Hokage let you leave with your life. You simply were of no consequence. A vein seemed to burst on Kakuzu's forehead. Fucking finally. Naruto thought. He dashed away, putting some distance between the two of them. As far as he could remember, he hadn't shown the one long-distance jutsu he really knew to any Akatsuki member. This one wouldn't live to tell the tale. You know what? Kakuzu started suddenly. Screw this. I'm going to blast you away, nine tails or not. If you manage to survive this, that's on you. The man laughed maniacally. You have speed and stamina. Kakuzu growled. And strength. Probably courtesy of the beast you're carrying. But you're clearly lacking in firepower, for a Jinchuriki. Wind, water, and fire gathered in the air. Perfect. Naruto thought. There was nothing here that could overpower his great arrow. Three elements or not, the potency of the chakra in the air was still inferior to what Naruto knew he could put out if he really gave it his all. Now, Kakuzu was right, in a way. Up until recently, he had nothing in his arsenal that would have done the trick. His previous bow would not have been able to handle the levels of power he needed here. Naruto would have had to whittle Kakuzu down, heart after heart, all the while hoping he didn't get caught by a man who had had a century to learn the shinobi arts. Luckily for Naruto, Kakuzu also had a hair-trigger temper. He just had to make him want to crush him badly enough to forego subtlety. Let's see how you fare against this, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto said nothing in return. He opened a scroll, unsealing his forged bow, the metal gleaming from the light of the flames around them. I need an arrow. He reached deep inside. Chakra exploded around Naruto's body, both lightning and wind. The bow seemed to feed on it, absorbing it greedily. Something called. On his right shoulder, he felt Tengu burn, begging to be released. Whispering of the coming chaos, conflict, taking to the skies. Naruto didn't need it to win, he was sure of it. He didn't need it. Kakuzu was as good as dead, and he already had a plan, if the arrow wasn't enough. He had refused to answer Tengu's call for a while now, he would continue to do so. He didn't need. He answered its call. Why would he take any chances? Purple energy exploded around him, gathering around both of his arms. The carving on his right shoulder burned. The Tengu mark stretched, shifted, until a red and gold, humanoid Tengu stood facing the heavens on his entire right arm. Naruto howled in primal rage. Wind and lightning, transformed. In his right hand, the bow was surrounded by a raging violet storm. He extended his left arm, and the purple light shaped itself into a spear-like arrow of pure violet chakra. He knocked it on a string of equally strong chakra. The storm called for its child, thunder and wind and change on the horizon. Kakuzu released his jutsu, laughing maniacally. Earth grudge fear, Ifrit. He and his threads melted together into a ghost-like wraith, made out of fire, threads, steam and blood. The energy he had accumulated gathered in its belly, and he shot a beam of superheated steam, rage, and flame straight at Naruto. The earth exploded in the path of the attack. Naruto let the arrow fly. Chakra met chakra, and the resulting blast was seen for kilometers around. When the smoke cleared, two men were standing. One of them had an expression of disbelief at his most powerful attack having been countered. He looked down at the gigantic hole in his chest. Kakuzu had no more hearts. This jutsu. How? Sasori didn't. You shitty brat. He groaned, before falling forward. His chakra slowly faded away. How could I dash? Death finally found Kakuzu the Immortal. Naruto let out a long shuddering breath, let the arrow's string disappear, and let the bow disappear as well. Only then did he start healing his bloodied, damaged fingers. That was another Akatsuki down. Chapter 90, Flight of Fancy. The wind rushed loudly, bringing tears to Ino's eyes. The seven tails was flying higher and higher. The air was cold up here, and she wished she had something heavier to wear. Like the cloak she had sealed away in a scroll she was carrying. She wasn't going to risk falling off the beast, though, so she kept both hands and feet against its slippery carapace, using chakra to stick to it. They were surrounded by wind and rain. The water soaked all three of them, making it hard to see up. Looking down, the plateau Taki had been standing on looked so small. She could not see much of the fighting anymore, either. She shot a sorry look at Toru and Hanabi. He shouted something she couldn't hear over the gale. She established a mental link again. What was that? Konan. We need to force Konan to back down or the beast is going to keep on going up. Toru said. He's right. The seven tails is panicking. Or angry. Hanabi confirmed. Let's climb faster, then. There's nothing we can do from here. And so they resumed their ascension of the beast. Naruto saw the seven tails up in the sky and cursed. There was no way he could reach that far up, even transformed into a bird of prey. He tried to estimate his remaining chakra reserves, which were close to a third. Naruto winced, and realized that even if he did manage to join them, he'd basically be a sitting duck. He reached for the bond. Ino. She took a moment to answer. Are you okay? I'm fine. Killed Kakuzu and sealed the body away. Are you? He felt her relief at this, even as she cut him off. We're okay. Need to focus. He nodded, pushing his worry away. All right. Be careful, please. Which part of this sounds careful? She smiled, cutting the connection for the time being. Naruto sighed. He looked around himself and his relief just crumbled away. The village of Taki was dying. There was no other word for it. The fires raged and he noticed that there were many survivors, all of them trapped inside a village that would be no more by the time the sun set. Trapped in between an army and a raging Biju. The sacking of Taki would be terrible, too, if the rumors about IWA Ninja were true. Naruto cursed, and summoned as many clones as he could manage and still have some chakra left over, in case anything happened. They set out to gather the survivors. A burst of roaring flames bathed the clouds in orange light. Missed us. Uchiha Toru grinned, landing with a front flip on top of the seven tails head. His sword was out, set aflame. If illusions didn't work, maybe an old-fashioned flaming sword would do the trick. You, again. Konan sighed. So, they hadn't fallen off, yet. She lifted her arm and froze. The paper around her started to fall away, out of her control. Which meant the Yamanaka was not far away. Yet Konan could not see her, at all. Meanwhile, the Hyuga girl was dashing around, her hands flowing, slapping the paper tags around the seven tails' eyes, and they reverted to normal paper entirely. The beast's eyes, red, both of them, fixed themselves upon Konan again. Orange and green chakra escaped from its helmet-like skull, headed for Konan. Mostly. It also broke Toru's focus, and the area-wide genjutsu he had cast dispelled, revealing Ino, who had to break her own jutsu when Konan sent a wave of razor-sharp paper after her. Hanabi's vacuum palm clipped one of her wings, separating it in two, and Konan had to waste more of her chakra to recreate another. The trail of noxious chakra was still following her. Instead of continuing to dodge the seven tails' homing attack, Konan dropped on top of its head, out of its sight, where the Biju couldn't really direct it. She waved her hands, and they broke into 1,000 sharp blades, shooting off at a rattling pace toward the three of them. Ino weaved hand signs, extending her hands, and the paper just fell away harmlessly, in a 5-meter radius around her. Konan stopped. As long as she had enough chakra to split her consciousness into two, the Uchiha would not be able to trap her. The Hyuga was annoying and would be hard to get rid of, since her gentle fist meant that she could disable her jutsu, although that was done at a somewhat slow pace. Which meant the Yamanaka was more problematic, right now. But she was also the slowest of the three. You could compare the situation to a board game. Instead of bothering to play with the rules of the game, Konan did the equivalent of flipping the table over. Konan saw the Uchiha's eye widen, as he saw what she was about to do before she did. He tried to shout a warning. Too late. She formed a paper sword and stabbed down, into the Seven-Tails' eye. It roared and a wave of chakra detonated, throwing all of them off its head. Conan nodded in satisfaction. What was the point in making such a simple thing more complicated than it needed to be? As the three UMI ninja plummeted to the ground below, screaming, Conan opened her wings and started subduing the beast once more. Kiri Camp, Red Island, Land of Water. You really are a lonely fellow, aren't you? Hojiki Suijutsu asked, sharp teeth bared into something that might or might not look like a friendly grin. Years ago, when he had been a child, Kiri went through a strange, short period of segregation and discrimination against bloodline limit users. Even now, nobody really dared to speak too openly about it, and officially, it had never happened at all. Suijutsu knew about the worst rumors, of course, of an entire clan of dissenters being wiped out seemingly overnight, for mentioning a government-sanctioned purge going on. The official reason behind their disappearance had apparently been sedition. Now, whether that meant they had actually planned to turn around and plan a coup or not, that was something only the Mizukage and his council could say. Because the formerly strong Terumi clan definitely had no one left to speak for them. A similar thing had happened to Karatachi Yagura's former council, in an event that still took Kiri's citizens by surprise. Funnily enough, when Suijutsu had been younger, he had thought that Kiri's people would never tolerate anything like the regime of terror that had slowly come through. It turned out to be false, because as things got worse and worse, people simply became too numb to care. Because where would they even go, in the end? The Kiri Hunternin took their job very seriously. Now, back to the present moment, and the man Suijutsu was currently speaking to. The other man grinned. The eye patch over his bisected eye, as well as his equally sharp teeth, probably would have made him look pretty intimidating to anybody who was not from Kiri. Well, you're wrong about one thing. I'm not lonely. Suijutsu chuckled. Of course, of course. You kinda seem like the type to prefer being alone. Which could make one wonder why you still decided that we needed to talk. The man grunted, going back to sharpening his sword. I've heard you're pretty good with that one. The man looked up. And where did you hear that, exactly? Suijutsu ignored the question. Would you be willing to spar with me? Shinji. Shinji continued to stare. Do I look like I want to spar? Well, if you put it like that. I guess not. Suijutsu grunted. Above Taki, land of canyons. They were high, high up in the sky, falling toward the ground far below. And neither of them could transform into anything that could fly, as far as Ino knew. The shock of suddenly falling meant that Ino couldn't reach the state of mind needed to leap. I can't. Ino panicked. You can't, what? Toru screamed back, trying to calm his own nerves. Hanabi, a bit higher up above them, didn't look so good either, her pale eyes wide in fright. I can't use the gates. I can't focus. Ino screamed. Me neither. Stop screaming. Toru screamed. The gates. Hanabi shouted over the raging winds. What did you say? Toru tried. Why use the gates? Hanabi repeated, her voice shrill. My summons are too small. Why use the swallows? What else? Make a parachute. Toru blinked. Shit, that could work. He took a few gasping breaths, trying to center himself. Toru motioned for Hanabi to come closer, which she did by diving headfirst. They reached Ino, who was still tumbling through the air, grabbing her to make her somewhat stable. Ino-san. Get your cloak out. Hanabi shouted. What? Any will do. No, wait, the thickest fabric you have. Seeing Ino's fumbling hands, Toru made sure she didn't let go of the scroll she had just grabbed. The cloak Naruto had given her not so long ago but felt so far away already would do just fine. Toru stuck to her, wrapping his legs around her, using chakra. What the hell are you doing? Get away from M-. Shut up. Stop moving. He complained. Hanabi, come closer. She made a noise of disgust, but did so anyway, sticking to him like a particularly angry backpack. Hanabi unfolded the cloak above them, nearly managing to break her own arms when it caught the wind. "It's not working!" Toru shouted. "Of course it's not working, dumbass. We're too heavy." Hanabi raged. "If you weren't eating so much fucking food dash. Me. How dare you? Fire." Ino suddenly realized. "Use fire with me? I don't want to become a fucking meteor, Ino. No. Through your sword. The hot air should help us slow down." Toru blinked. "Whatever." He pulled his weapon out and the both of them started channeling fire, while Hanabi kept the cloak open above their heads. The heat emanating through the chakra-conductive, superheated weapon went up. Slowly, they started slowing down. "I can't believe this is working," Toru said. "Keep your focus on it." Hanabi screamed. "If you fuck up, we're dead. And then I'll kill you." They glided down, at a fast pace, but one that they knew wouldn't kill them. "I think I can take us away," Ino finally said. "Leaping, I mean." "To go where?" Toru asked. "The Seven Tails is still so far up. I thought you wanted to prevent that." "I would love to but dash. Something is approaching," Hanabi said, activating her Byakugan without hand seals. "It's Anko-san." "What?" "She's coming to us," Hanabi confirmed. "On a snake." Sure enough, less than a minute later, the flying snake hovered in the air next to them. Anko grinned when she saw them. "Well, this is a sight for sore eyes." She laughed. "You guys look absolutely ridiculous. I wish I could take a picture. Please help us come up." Ino groaned. Anko would never let them forget. It was so much worse than Naruto had thought. The fire continued to rage, unstoppable to the very few Taki ninja that still remained alive inside the village itself, trying to stop it. They ignored him, knowing he had fought against Kakuzu. Some buildings had been crushed as well, maybe courtesy of Fu's wild rampage before he had come. Time seemed to slow down, as he tried to stay in control. The death toll was not so high, apparently, but there were people, children under ruined buildings, and he couldn't tell if Kakuzu had caused this during their battle, or when he had first come. He didn't dare ask. He knew he was angry, and he knew that if he hadn't killed the man himself, he would have wanted to find him, to destroy him. But Kakuzu was gone. And if everything went well, Konan would be gone, too. Who else was there to blame, besides himself? Iwa, too. Could he have stopped this, if he had been stronger? Taki was a strong village in its own right, and they were supposed to have the might of a Biju. Compared to something as new as UMI. No. This wouldn't happen to UMI. He wouldn't let it happen to UMI. But one thing was clear. The power of the beasts, the peace brokered through mutually assured destruction, didn't hold up anymore. Whether it was because Fu was unstable, or because the concept had been flawed from the very beginning, he couldn't tell. A perfect Jinhiriki might have changed things today. Or not. The only way to stop something like this from happening was to become strong. Stronger than a Jinhiriki. Stronger than Akatsuki. Maybe he was just latching on to something, anything to prevent himself from screaming his rage, his frustration at the state of things. But he knew that in this world, this was the truth. Power controlled everything. He didn't know it yet, but this was the second spark. A more insidious one, but one that would decide his future, nonetheless. And the future of the world. Kiri Camp, Red Island, Land of Water. The alcohol was flowing around the camp. It was as secure as it got, as they had plenty of sentries along the way, and a veritable army stationed on the island. "There's something strange about the guy from Yoimizu," Suijitsu said, a bit later. An older woman, whose name was Kame, answered. "Well, you just said he was from Yoimizu. Every single person from there is a bit fucked up." Most of the Kiri ninja gathered chuckled, downing rice beer. "I would know." Kame finished, laughing. "I'm from there." "No way." Hiraki cackled. "I would never have guessed." "Oh, yeah?" Kame asked, staring at him dangerously. "What would you have said?" The man hesitated. Kame snorted. I'm joking, you fool. Arita cackled. Hiraki let out a tired sigh. Scary woman, that one. Anyways. Kame continued. Normally, I'd agree with you. That this Shinji guy is pretty strange. But, he just had a son. What? Satoshi exclaimed. This guy? No fucking way. Yes, way. Kame said dryly. Oh, and I'd be careful, he's coming this way, right now. Kame-san. Shinji greeted her, not bothering to sit at the table. Shinji. Kame smiled warmly. Then, addressing the table. This man became a father just a few days ago, we received news from Kiri. They congratulated him, some more warmly than others. How will you name him, once he reaches his first birthday? Satoshi asked, looking somewhat sheepish, now that he actually had to face the man. Ah. Shinji said, a bit embarrassed. He finally sat down. You don't have a name in mind, then? Suijitsu asked, willing to at least give the strange man another chance. Come on, guys. Kame sighed. Don't push him, he clearly hasn't picked anything yet. He's got a year, anyway. Suijitsu shrugged. No big deal. No. Shinji said. Huh. I have a name in mind. What is it, then? Satoshi smiled. It's just, my wife doesn't agree. Shinji smiled a bit, which looked odd on his hard, scarred face. Oh, man. Suijitsu laughed. Did you plan on naming him fucking Kisame, by any chance? Satoshi almost choked on his beer, and Hiraki laughed about either the joke, or Satoshi's misfortune. Shinji smiled a bit self-consciously. No. Nothing quite as bad as that. Still pretty out there, though. Now, I think you got all of us pretty curious. Kame ended up admitting. It's, in honor of someone who's a bit controversial. Shinji said. Let's say. Who? Yotakata. Hiraki winced, and Satoshi just gave him a blank look. Yeah. He finally said. That would definitely do it. Hiraki didn't think the Six Tails lad had been particularly bad, but seeing how Yagura, who had been just as pleasant in the past, had turned out, he was a bit wary, to say the least. And so were many people. Maybe it was Biju madness, or something like it. Holding a beast of monstrous power within your soul was likely not going to do anyone's mental state any favor. Kame was silent. Then. Why him? We grew up together, and I kinda lost sight of what happened to him a long while ago. Shinji said, looking a bit guilty. It was long after he, well, became a host. I see. The woman nodded. Satoshi said nothing. What is it? Kame prodded. I know what happened to him. He admitted. Shinji gave him a troubled look. What happened to him? Yeah. Oh God. Shinji looked very worried, now. It actually made him seem more relatable. Is he? Satoshi gave them all a careful look, and then shook his head. It's supposed to be something of a secret, actually. So if anybody asks. Miwa told you. Akamine Miwa, who was well known for spilling information a bit too easily once she got alcohol into her system. A few drops would do the trick. Satoshi met Kame's eyes for an instant. Then Shinji nodded solemnly. He wanted to know. No, he needed to know. His lone green eye conveying so much honest emotion that Satoshi felt bad for even doubting him. He said, in conspiratorial tones. Right after the war started. Yotakata just disappeared. The higher-ups are trying to suppress the information, but rumor has it he was kidnapped. He took a swig. Well, it's probably just a dumb rumor, the kid is fucking strong. Damn. Hiraki said. Even a Jinchuriki? Hey, I said it's just a rumor. Satoshi stressed. No worries, I'm never going to tell it was you. He grinned. Good, good. Satoshi nodded, a bit relieved. Kame and Shinji shared a look, before looking back at him. They really looked as though they came from the same district. Not their appearances, but their mannerisms were similar. Now, Kame said, her eyes glinting strangely in the light, looking almost golden. What did you just say about the Jinchuriki? Check the description for the links to the author.